That's crazy. I think it comes down to this. Oh my god, Sailor, you monster. Sailor, you beast. Oh, I love this guy. Down, Leon, go. What a terrifying boss. It actually came down to me getting a critical hit. That's crazy. And now he gets the speed. If I would have got that speed in the map... The map didn't end. The map didn't end. I have to do this again. I have to do it all again. Because I can't fight the Demon King. Why didn't the map end? I'm saying, is it because I added more bosses? Woo! Well. We'll be back. What's going on, guys? Show of hands. Who saw that coming after I killed Leon? I certainly did not. I wasn't cliffhanging you guys just to be a jerk. I actually had to go back in, do a little bit more finagling to make this work. I've double-checked ahead, and I know that the final part of the map will now finally load properly. So thank God for that. Unfortunately, I do still have to play through this map again. At least I get to listen to Land of Promise for a little bit longer, so there's always that to look forward to. But I promised you guys that I would answer some of your questions in this part, so we can just go ahead and take this footage and tuck that into the corner right there. Yeah, that should be good. And let's get started on these. Now, these are in no particular order. I'm just reading them as I see them. Let's just jump into it, though. Mega Master 1021 asks a few questions here. 1, do you play Heroes? No, I actually don't play Heroes. I have a... Yeah, that. Heroes isn't actually available on the Google Play Store, so I haven't been able to play it ever since it came out. I did actually at one point download BlueStacks and try playing it that way. Had the speakers turned all the way up too. I got blown away, man. But I didn't ever really commit to it just because I didn't want to get banned, because I was following it a little bit. From what I understand, emulators got banned off the servers. I didn't want to get attached to a game that I wouldn't necessarily be able to play at my leisure, I suppose. So no, I never really got into the Heroes craze. Question 2, well, this is a little bit awkward considering the first answer, but what character or specific type of banner, husband and wife, / brothers, / sisters, old guys, Jagans, etc., would you like to see in Heroes? Well, I don't play Heroes, but you know what I think we need? I think we need a Bastards banner. Yeah, let's do a whole banner dedicated to Bastards in the Fire Emblem series. I know they already released Saiya's, but let's go ahead and make a Saiya's re-release, and his skill could just be 10 stars arranged in the face of a smiley face on his skill status screen. And what it would do is, half the time when you attack, nothing happens. It also applies to himself. Also be a pretty good opportunity to bring in Fergus. I'm kind of surprised that he didn't get into the latest update of that game. It seemed like for a Thracia banner, they would definitely include him. He's like one of the more beloved characters, right? Alongside Othin, Asvel, Marita. Those would have all been good picks. I'm surprised to see none of them. But to get back to that, they could have also included Fergus, and his ability would be that when you attack him and fail to kill him, he just kills you. He just kills you outright. It could be called PCC, and it would be bullshit. It could also include Henning from Fire Emblem 6. Now, I don't know if his parents wanted him or not, but goddamn, this guy is a real bastard if I ever saw one. Question 3, do you plan to LP Thracia? Never say never. I feel like I would have to play through Fire Emblem 4 before I actually jumped into that one, just because it probably wouldn't make too much sense. It is a side story after all, so I feel that a lot of the characters and the plot points that are important to that game sort of stem from Fire Emblem 4, and it wouldn't make too much sense to just jump into that one. Now, I know I started a playthrough of Fire Emblem 12 without doing 11, but I feel like that was a bit of an exception. I feel like that game is a little bit easier to get into. You don't have to know nearly as much about the world, and there's plenty of flashback scenes and whatnot. But with Fire Emblem 5, it's a whole different beast. And honestly, I would really like to wait for a more complete translation patch. Now, the one that is out currently works. Yeah, actually, I think I'm going to end that thought there. That's about the perfect description, honestly. The one that is out there works. But I would like to see one more on par with the new Fire Emblem 4 translation before I got around to that. But who knows? Who knows? Knowing my luck, I would finish the Thracia LP, and then the next day the new translation would come out, just because that seems like something that would happen to me, but we'll see, we'll see. It's definitely something that's been on my mind, though. And question number 4, what game do you think deserves to get a remake the most? Honestly, I think that Fire Emblem 6 will be the next game to get a remake, but the one that I personally think deserves it the most would have to be Fire Emblem 4, Genealogy of the Holy War. Now, that's a game with a lot of interesting ideas and concepts, and I think that it would sell well on the whole pairings thing alone. I think that that would be a really good marketing scheme if they were to go that route. But it also has a lot of interesting ideas, very unique gameplay, similar to what they did with Echoes, actually, where they brought over a game that has a lot of unique elements and introduced it to the Western audience. I think it would be a good idea to give Fire Emblem 4 the same treatment. There's some things that do need to be touched up a little bit, mostly with regard to balancing, I would say. The one thing I would absolutely hate to see, though, is them to touch the map size. Now, I'm not saying keep it 1-to-1. It doesn't have to be tile for tile, the same maps that we saw in Fire Emblem 4. No, I don't think that that would necessarily be required for a remake like this. But to shrink the maps down or to cut them into separate segments, to remove things like individual money, events out the ass, in fact, skills. I even think that Pursuit should probably stay, but be retooled a little bit to make it not such an important skill, but still a good skill at that. See, I think that they should stay because if you remove things like that, then it's not really Fire Emblem 4 at that point, especially the map size. I see a lot of people when they're discussing a Fire Emblem 4 remake, they always seem to say that they would like to see the map sizes reduced or cut into individual chapters and whatnot, but that's not really Fire Emblem 4. That's not really the point of that game. As for changes that I do think would be a good thing, not individual money, I think that the pawn shop system is probably good as well. Maybe make it, and this is a maybe, I don't know really how I feel about this, but maybe make it so that lovers can trade items, maybe. And that's a very big maybe. But I can see that maybe not breaking the game so much, and it would give you more incentive to try and do that in the second generation because there's not really much of one right now. Other than that, leave it mostly the same, but as for the actual maps themselves, the only thing that I would really like to see changed would be to add more things for your foot soldiers to do. Have more situations where you have to defend a castle from an enemy attack, or just have more enemies closer to the beginning of the map so that when you're sending your cavalry off to the most distant parts of the map, the people who don't have as high movement actually have something to do. And I think that that would be the biggest thing that they should change. Give non-mounted units more things to do. And maybe tick the cavalry a point of movement or something like that. And you might say, well, why not increase the movement on infantry? Wouldn't that make more sense? And I don't think that it does because of the road system, and I'm not really going to get all into that. But basically, the way it is right now, cavalry have such a huge advantage because they have just enough movement to get even more movement. They get a bigger bonus for roads than infantry movements do. And if you actually tick them a point of movement rather than add a point of movement to infantry, then they're both getting the same bonus from roads, and I think that that would help a lot too. If you do that, of course, make the map slightly smaller, but leave the idea intact, right? Keep it in the spirit, but if you do go that route with infantry, cavalry balance, I would say make the maps ever so slightly smaller so it still takes the same amount of time to get stuff done. But other than that, really, leave it alone, man. Leave it alone. Rebalance it a little bit, but keep the core gameplay the same, I would say. Oh, wait. And don't make the rescue staff for the second generation lock behind one specific pairing out of the many possible. God, that's one of the most annoying things about that game, honestly. The rescue staff makes that game so much different, man. Gato Fizz asks, what is your favorite flavor of coffee? Wait, no. He asks, what is your favorite Fire Emblem game? Now, I'm gonna have to say Thracia 776 still holds it for me. I feel like Echoes is really far up there, man. But I saw a question specifically relating to that one, so I'll hold off for the time being. But the reason that Thracia 776 takes it for me, I think has a lot to do with its unique qualities, not just the gameplay. I mean, obviously there's some bullshit mixed into there. Let's not forget the fact that that game has no 0 or 100% hit rates, has warp tiles that will randomly teleport units into an unescapable room without using rewarp or rescue. Oh, missing staves, that's always fun, missing staves. status effects that do not wear off. Status effect stabs with omnipotent range can hit anywhere on the map regardless. I'm pretty sure that status stabs also just hit you if you have lower res than they have magic, so there's really no chance for that to miss, so have fun with that. Some really obscure elements to that game in particular, such as recruiting Xavier. That's always really fun. But despite all the cryptic things and BS nature of some of the mechanics, I really think that the other gameplay elements really make up for it, like the capturing system, introducing the whole rescue mechanic, and a lot of the modern standards really for games that we see today in this series. Not only that, but I like that the gameplay manages to be challenging without inflating enemy stats to a super high degree. Now, they outnumber you by a pretty wide margin, but they're not actually all that when you really break it down and look at each individual enemy. They're actually pretty pathetic. Probably some of the weakest enemies in the series at that. But what makes it so difficult is the tactics that they employ, the situations that you find yourselves in where you're sort of put at a disadvantage on most maps. And what I like about that is that it actually ties so directly into the narrative, and I think that that's a really cool thing, because this game is like gameplay, storyline, integration, the game, man. Because this entire game is basically about Leaf and how he feels incompetent as a leader. He doesn't feel special. He doesn't feel like he's capable of standing his own with people such as Celise and whatnot, and other characters with holy blood, Seti, for example. And the game reminds you of that constantly. The game does not spare any effort to remind you of the fact that you are on the losing side here. You are outnumbered. You are the weaker army here. And you have no business taking these guys on. And every single map makes you feel that exact feeling. I have never played a game where even when you're winning, you feel like you're losing. And and that's something that I really like about Thracia 776, honestly. It gets that perfectly, and it does that in a way that doesn't feel necessarily unfair either, because for as much broken BS that there is in that game, you get access to just as much, and you can throw that back the enemy's way just fine. Warp Staff, Rewarp Staff, all the crazy personal weapons, other status stabs, sleep stabs, you name it, it's there. I'm noticing a pattern here, lots of broken stabs. Overall, though, I just think it's a pretty solid experience, and I like the fact that it's not trying to tell a story that's so grand. It's a more personal story as well, and that's something that you don't really see a lot in this series either, and that was pretty cool to me, pretty unique aspect to the whole game. Even if it is kind of hell to play blind, I think that it's worth a playthrough at least once, but again, I'm still kind of hoping for a better translation, and I feel like that's what puts off a lot of people, but if you can manage with what we have available, I would definitely say give it a look. Give it a look. Favorite Fire Emblem randomized character? I mean... Okay, just so this is actually a little bit more interesting, let's do 5 characters that aren't Nino or Ray. Let's start there. Just so that way some of the sleeper picks might get a chance to shine. So number 5, we have Space Invada. Maybe a little bit of a boring pick, but honestly I was just so surprised that she stayed so solid throughout the entire game. And honestly I've never had a really good chance to use Vida, considering how late she actually joins in Fire Emblem 7. So I was very surprised and very impressed to see that by the end of the game she was still just as solid as she was on map 1. So that was pretty cool. She was a great Jagan. Number 4, Lelena. I don't know what it is about this that's so funny to me, but just the idea of Lilina being the strongest archer of all time is so hilarious. It's just too funny to not include her, and she was a great unit as well. Definitely one of the few carries that I had for Fire Emblem 6, no doubt. Number 3, Lucius. Oh, Lucy, the underdog that was never meant to be. I feel like a lot of that has more to do with my own insanity than anything that he actually contributed to the game, but god damn it, I wanted this guy to be good. And then Farina comes along and just totally outclasses him. I feel bad for the guy. I can't help but feel bad for the guy, but he will always have a special place in my heart as the unit that never was. Number 2, and this is cheating, I do not care. The Walt Zeiss combo from Fire Emblem 6 randomized. My god! I'm starting to see why you never get more than one dance character in the same game. This stuff is broken. At number 1, are you ready for this? Because I don't think you are. It's not who you think. My number 1 favorite randomized character, excluding Ray and Nino, is Dorothy. Yeah, that's right, Dorothy. That one archer that nobody ever remembers is in Fire Emblem 6. Yes, that is correct. Dorothy. The underdog that could. The unit that I never thought would be doing anything throughout the entire playthrough. And then in the last 5 or so most difficult maps became an absolute beast. Tore up the entire battlefield. Carried the team. And you know what the weird part is? Dorothy being a terrible lord is actually so funny to me, because that's basically the whole point of Fire Emblem 6 to begin with. Roy is supposed to be horrible. He's supposed to be bad. He's a thinker. He's a tactician. He's not supposed to be the most broken, super overpowered character of all time. And I think that the fact that Dorothy herself was also really bad at fighting for 90% of the game is both really fitting, and it also plays really well into the gameplay of Fire Emblem 6, where most of the maps are designed around the fact that your lord is going to be terrible. So you have to sort of escort somebody who's bad from point A to point B, and that's the way the entire game works. And I think that it couldn't be a more fitting way to play that game, in all honesty. I also like the fact that she wasn't entirely useless, because she was a flyer, so there was always that. But yeah, so there you go. Dorothy, #1 pick. Also, her palette as a Roylord was totally badass. Gotta give her points for that, man. Favorite Let's Play. I'm gonna go ahead and give this one to Fire Emblem 7 Randomized. It was really cool seeing everybody's input on that, seeing what people... seeing what characters people were rooting for, seeing other people's experiences with Fire Emblem in general. The fan art, of course, that was just amazing, and I feel like I personally had a lot of fun with that too. Coming right off the Fire Emblem 6 randomizer, there were a lot of weird coincidences between those two games, and I think it made for a pretty fun time. So yeah, I think I would give it to Fire Emblem 7 randomized. Your worst/hardest Let's Play. Well, I'm gonna go ahead right now and give the hardest Let's Play to probably Fire Emblem 12 Lunatic Reverse. That's a nightmare. That's a nightmare. If you're one of those people who likes to see me struggle with this kind of thing, definitely check that one out, because I feel like you'd be right at home. The worst Let's Play no longer exists. So unsurprisingly, my first Let's Play was my worst one. I tried to play through Final Fantasy Tactics 1.3. It's a difficulty mod for the Final Fantasy Tactics game on the PlayStation 1. Fantastic game, one of my favorites, in fact. But I was just so inexperienced and so new to this whole thing that I don't really feel like I did it justice. I feel like first impressions are just so important. And if you came to this channel and that was the first thing you saw, it wasn't something that I was personally happy with. So I ended up deleting it entirely. And even if you saw that and you were still like, oh, okay, this isn't so bad, I felt like that the way I was at the beginning of the playthrough didn't really mesh up with the way that I was in the later parts of that playthrough, and I didn't feel like it was a very good representation of what I wanted to show with that game and what I really wanted to do here. So that's why I ended up getting rid of that entirely. But by far, that was my least favorite playthrough. Not for the game or anything, but just for my own commentary and my own abilities. Who is your favorite Fire Emblem villain? I have two different answers for this, and one of them is kind of cheating, so we're not going to count that as the real answer, but my reasoning behind both of them is pretty similar. Now, the first answer that comes to mind would be the Black Fang as a whole, and I know that's not really a fair answer, but I like the fact that each of them has their own personalities to them. I like the fact that there's like separate factions within that group between the people who came along with Nurgle and the original members of the Black Fang, who are very distinct and very different from one another. But the thing that I like about that group is that they get stuff done. They feel like a threat. And that's something that I feel some other Fire Emblem villains really struggle with, especially villains who tend to only show up at the very end of the game, who don't really do much throughout the entire adventure. They just seem like almost an afterthought in some senses. And although they might have been pulling the strings all along, it's really nice to be able to see them in action and feel the sort of overwhelming pressure that they're supposed to exert, right? So, keeping in mind my first answer, I'm going to give this one to the Black Knight. Not because he's necessarily the most interesting character, although to be fair, I was definitely very interested in him the first time I played through Path of Radiance, and it was fun to learn about his backstory and motivations in Radiant Dawn. But the reason I'm giving him this title would be because he's constantly on your ass throughout the entire game, and he really feels like a threat. You don't know when the next time he's going to show up is, and that's something that I can't really say that other games do that, because when you first see him in like chapter 10, he just shows up out of this random house in the middle of nowhere, and you're like, oh crap. this guy's really here. He's really on the map. He's gonna chase me down, and he is going to kill me if anybody even thinks about fighting him. He could breathe in your general direction, and you would fall over. That's how strong this guy is the first time you encounter him. And then you encounter him again later down the line, and you see him in these story sequences, and it's just building up this big, mysterious thing, and you know it's gonna finally culminate in one final battle between him and Ike. It's like a test in a sort of way to see if Ike has grown enough as a character by the time you actually have to take him on, right? To see if you are actually able to best this enemy who's been pestering you throughout the entire adventure, and I think that's really cool. And I think what really adds to that again is the fact that you don't know when this guy is gonna show up. Especially when the game starts saying that, oh, he can just warp around and crap. So that basically opens up so many possibilities. It doesn't really matter if he's anywhere near you. He can just show up in the middle of any old map. You wouldn't be able to do a damn thing about it. And I think that's really cool. I guess runner-up would be Naysala because he's a prick. And I always find him really entertaining. Although he's not really a villain, so I guess that probably doesn't count. Can you name the best mage in Fire Emblem? I feel like this is a loaded question. Ah, yep, there it is. You know what? No. I'm gonna give you this one. Delthea actually is my favorite mage in Echoes. I'll give you that. I saw her stats and I thought for sure she would be way too late joining, too under level, too weak to get anything done. But no, oh god, no. She annihilates every mage on her joining map. And from there she gets to annihilate barons in the next map. And then by that point she's actually a really good unit who holds her own. So you know what? Not my favorite mage. But my favorite mage in Echoes, I'm gonna give you this one. Also, I found her pretty funny, so there's also that. But the best mage is Seti, let's be honest. Let's not even begin to kid ourselves. And you say, oh, he's a sage. I don't care if he's a sage or not, man. He was a mage at some point. Just let me have this. Who else is so broken that they can actually overflow their speed back down to 0? I've never heard of such a thing. He's just that good. The boy says, this is, hey, I remember when you were Murdoch. What's going on? This is 10 out of 10. I've been watching your videos since like November 2016. I'm sorry. I gotta ask how you'd rank every game in the series against each other. Great job. Thank you. Oh, this is a hard one. I think I'm gonna take a second to think about this. This is a pretty tricky question. Okay, not gonna lie, I thought way too hard about this. I think I have some kind of problem. But without further ado, let's just get into this. And you know what? If you disagree with me, that's fine. I'm not here to argue about it or anything. This is just my personal opinion on this. So, number 1, Thracia776, for reasons that I have already discussed. Number 2, Fire Emblem Echoes, a sleeper pick here. I don't think anybody saw this being rated that high, but I will get into that in a moment. I'll get into that later. There was a more specific question relating specifically to this game. So for now, just hold your booze. Hold your booze. Don't crucify me, man. It's just an opinion. Number 3, Path of Radiance. The world was just really interesting to me, and I found that it's very easy to find yourself sucked into this whole... The whole storyline is just very engaging. Ike is a very endearing lord, honestly, in this game. I definitely like him more in this game than I do in Radiant Dawn, but that wasn't really his game, so I can excuse that to an extent. And he still had his little attitude that kind of drew me to him in the first place. But definitely of the two, Path of Radiance has the stronger story. I feel like the characterization is stronger, and it just has so much charm. Fire Emblem 4, coming in at number 4, ironically. There's something about this game that strikes me as so ambitious. I really like the direction that they were trying to go with the plot. It's a lot darker of a game, a very political game as well. But just the whole idea of this conflict spanning multiple generations is very interesting. I've never seen anything like that really when I had originally played it. This one used to be my favorite game, but over time I sort of see more and more of the flaws in it, but I still think that it holds up pretty well. There are some problems. And I feel like I've already kind of talked about what a lot of those are, but for the most part, it's a pretty good experience. Unfortunately, by this point in time, I feel like most people in the fan base that are aware of this game already know of the big twist, so that kind of takes out some of the impact. But when I first played it, I didn't really know what was going on. I just heard that it was supposed to be a really good game in the series, and that was all I really knew. So for me, I suppose that had a little bit more of an impact, but hey, if you're totally in the dark, I would definitely give this one a look. Even if you're not in the dark, I would give it a look. I know it's not for everybody. Sometimes people are a little bit turned off by the gameplay. It is a very different game. It takes a very different way of thinking, and I could go into that more, but I want to keep this moving. I want to keep this moving, but I don't think that it's bad, and I don't think that the gameplay is very bad either. I feel like a lot of people just have bit of trouble adjusting to what this game actually expects of you, because it's not the same. It's not the same by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think that makes it bad. Number 5, Radiant Dawn. Oh, Radiant Dawn was a very interesting experience for sure. I really liked how the perspective was constantly shifting back and forth between multiple parties. That was a really cool way to tell the story, so that way you could view certain things from different angles, and it provided a more full experience, I think. There are some gameplay issues, obviously, most notably with characters. Like, what the hell happened to Tormod? He disappeared for 90% of that game. And that was a little bit disappointing to see. I wish that more characters would have been viable, but honestly, I played through it, for the most part, completely blind. Using just characters that I felt like. And I used some really, really bad units in that playthrough, guys. We're talking Fiona, we're talking Lyre, we're talking Astrid, we're talking Lucia. Brought all 4 of those boys to the tower. Actually, now that I think about it, all of them are girls. So I brought all 4 of them girls to the tower. Did just fine. So I don't think that necessarily you're restricted from using characters that you want to use, but there is definitely a huge power imbalance, and I think that would be the number one thing, at least with the gameplay. The blood pack thing, pretty stupid. Not gonna lie, I think it could have worked. I still stand by that. I think that had they put a little bit more thought into it and explained it a little bit better in what it can and can't do, that would have worked out a lot better. It might have still been a little bit silly, but it wouldn't be as glaring of an issue as it is. But still, overall, pretty solid game. Not a whole lot for me to complain about with that one, honestly. I actually do like Micaiah to some extent. She's not my favorite lord, but she's not bad. I really don't get the hate that she receives. I like how far the game was willing to go to show that she will do literally anything if it means saving Dayin, her home country. It was interesting to see her juxtaposed with Ike, and it was definitely interesting to sort of step into the shoes of the bad guys, right? For when you were playing as the Dawn Brigade in Part 3, that was definitely something that I didn't really expect. Because clearly they're on the wrong side of the war, right? They're fighting for the Begnion senatorial assholes. They're sort of caught between a rock and a hard place, so you can understand where they're coming from, but at the same time you know that they're completely in the wrong. And that was a pretty interesting take on the typical Fire Emblem formula, where usually you're just like the goody-goody two-shoes guy, right? And you know for a fact that you're the good guy. You're gonna go kick some dragon's ass. Oh, that's another thing. There was no dragon final boss, and I really like that. Filled in a lot of loose ends as they relate to Path of Radiance. That was another aspect about that I really enjoyed, but I would have been shocked had they not gone that route. But overall, I feel like it's a worthy sequel to Path of Radiance, and although I would rate the original game a little bit higher, I definitely have to give it to Fire Emblem 10 in terms of gameplay. Full stop, no questions there. It's gotta be Fire Emblem 10. Number 6, Fire Emblem New Mystery. Now this one's here almost purely for gameplay reasons. Now I do like the characters, I do like the story. Don't get me wrong, those are still both very good aspects to this game. The soundtrack is amazing as well. Didn't really mention the soundtrack in the other games, but you'll be seeing some of those later down based on some of these questions that I'm seeing here, so don't worry about that. But really, I just feel like the gameplay in this title in particular is just so solid. The reclassing system is really cool. I like it a lot. I know that some people don't care for it just because they somehow feel that detracts from character personalities. I disagree. You're free to feel however you want about that, but it doesn't really get in my way of enjoying this game. Just know that that's not really factoring into this whole equation of why I put this where I have. On higher difficulties, I feel like it can provide a unique challenge that sort of forces you to think in different ways and do things that you might not ordinarily do in other games. I find a lot of the maps to be very creative in their solutions, and I feel as though they're probably some of the strongest maps, at least on the whole, in the series, although there are some definite losers in there too, like Chapter 3, as we've seen if you've been watching the playthrough of this I'm doing right now. And I don't really want to get too far into my thoughts, because I am doing an entire playthrough on this one, so if you want to see more of what I think about that game, feel free to check that out. But it's not just for the hardcore either, because I feel as though on lower difficulties you have some free reign to do some pretty crazy stuff with the reclassing stuff. I don't know, make Wendell a swordmaster or something, for example, and you'd be more than capable of doing so. And I think that that's a fun little option that you wouldn't have in other titles necessarily. And I don't really want to go in too much with this story, but I think it's perfectly fine. I think really that Mystery of the Emblem is like the baseline standard for Fire Emblem games, honestly, at least in terms of storyline. And it doesn't do anything too crazy, but there are some twists along the way. Although, again, at this point in time, much like Fire Emblem 4, I imagine that most of that is common knowledge by this point. Number 7, Fire Emblem 8. That is confusing. I'm sure some people are surprised to see the Game Boy Advance games starting out so far down the list, but that's not necessarily to say that they're bad games. And I'll go ahead and add right now, that's not saying that any of these are bad games. I don't really think that there are too many games in this series that I would say aren't good. We'll get to those, but for now, just know that I'm not saying that necessarily any of these are bad games. The thing that holds Fire Emblem 8 back for me the most is without a doubt the gameplay. So we had Fire Emblem 12, which I'm putting so high because of really good gameplay. Fire Emblem 8 is a little bit lower because I don't think that the gameplay is that great. I do have to say, in that regard, it's still a good game for newer players, because it's not so much that the map designs are bad, it's not so much that the enemy placements are bad, it's all down to the stats in this case. The enemies are pure, unadulterated garbage, absolute filth, dude. They could not stand up to a stiff breeze on a warm summer night. I'm telling you, these guys have no chance against you from the word go, and it never really gets any better, and that's sort of my biggest problem with this game. Even on higher difficulties, well, I say higher difficulties, even on hard mode, there's really only a handful of maps that would provide even the average player a significant challenge. I'm looking at the Phantom Ship, that one's pretty notoriously hard. Father and Son on Ephraim's Route is also another one that can trip some people up. But outside of those two maps, there's really nothing to keep you on your toes. And I will say that it's probably a pretty good game to try and learn if you wanted to get better at the series as a whole, because it's not really all that punishing. What does save this game for me, though, is the side characters. Out of all the Game Boy Advance games, I feel like they had the most diversity and were the most fleshed out in this game. It should be said that this game definitely has the smallest cast out of the 3 Game Boy Advance titles by a pretty fair amount, but I think that what they were able to do with that was pretty significant, was pretty substantial. I also like Leon. I just kind of feel bad for the guy, not gonna lie. A lot of the problems are his own fault, sure, but the game does a decent enough job of at least explaining his thoughts and motivations. So in that regard, I think that he is a competent enough villain. He does his job well enough, and he doesn't really leave me complaining in any meaningful way. So again, really the only thing holding this one back has got to be the gameplay. Other than that, pretty great game, good music. The maps themselves are designed well, again, just held back by poor enemies. And there's also the creature campaign, which can be fun for people who like to grind and whatnot. I used to be heavy into that, not so much these days, but it is also something that you can do after the game is concluded, so that was another fun little element to it, I suppose. Number 7, Fire Emblem 6. God, these just keep getting more and more confusing. Sort of like Fire Emblem 12, this one is more of a pure gameplay sort of thing. I find that this game is, well, it's challenging for one, and that's something that I tend to enjoy. Similar to Fire Emblem 12, this game is pretty horribly balanced, but I feel like in Fire Emblem 12, you're a little bit more free on the normal difficulty to do whatever you so choose. And I think that that is sort of to Fire Emblem 6's detriment, because even on the lower difficulties, you're going to want to use certain units. You're sort of shoehorned in a certain direction. Now, it's not nearly as overbearing on hard mode. On hard mode is an entirely different beast in this game, honestly. But I feel like even that said, it's just that extra little bit more restrictive in who you can and can't use. And part of the fun of Fire Emblem is definitely choosing the units that you want to use, using the characters you just happen to like. I think that's why Fire Emblem 10 was such a game for, yeah, it was such a game. I think that's why Fire Emblem 10 was such a fun game for me personally, was because it was one of those times where I was just using whoever I happened to have an affinity with, you know what I mean? You don't necessarily get that in this game as much. Again, this is like strictly on hard mode. Normal mode, a little bit more forgiving, and yet not as much as I would like. Not as much as I would like. Some characters are still going to be bad no matter what, like Sophia, she's hopeless, beyond hopeless. Wendy, beyond hopeless. But if you can look past that, I find that a lot of the maps offer an interesting challenge, and even on normal mode, they can be pretty tough to the lesser experienced player because of the situations they put you in. To go back to what I was talking about with Thracia, the normal difficulty challenges you with the situations, and then the hard mode challenges you with stats on top of that. So I think that that's a pretty interesting way to go about it. Not really too much else to add about this one, unfortunately. This one honestly could go where I put Fire Emblem 7, which, spoiler alert, is the next one. I can honestly flip-flop the two because, truth be told, the storyline in Fire Emblem 6 is very, very bog standard. It's basically a slightly different retelling of Fire Emblem 3, if I'm being perfectly honest. They're very, very similar games, as a lot of people in the community have pointed out time and time again. But I don't think that necessarily makes a bad game, and if you're one of the people who values gameplay, I think that it's definitely worth a look. Number 8, Fire Emblem 7. God damn it! I like a lot of the characters, I like most of the gameplay, but the thing that puts this one where it is on this list is that it just doesn't really stand out in any particular way. You know what I mean? It's like, there's nothing wrong with this game. Let me be clear with that. There's nothing wrong with this game. I love this game. I have a lot of nostalgia for this game. But if I'm looking at it objectively, right, there's no one area that this game in particular excels over the other. I don't think that it has better characters than Fire Emblem 8, although I do love a lot of the characters in this game, don't get me wrong. I don't think that it has better music than Fire Emblem 8, 7, any of the DS games, the 3DS games to an extent. I don't think that it has the best story. I don't think that it has the best gameplay, even among the GBA games. So it's hard for me to put this one higher, but it's also hard for me to put it as low as I have, because I do have a lot of nostalgia for this one, but it's just standard in a lot of ways. Not that there's really anything wrong with that, but if I'm gonna rate these games, I feel like I need just a little bit more if I was gonna rate this higher. Really good game, really good entry point to the series, but it doesn't really take any significant risks, and it's just kind of there in some regards. Again, I do love this game a lot, but I just can't see myself putting it much higher than this. Maybe 1 or 2 points. Like I say, I could probably switch 6 and 7, and I think I'd be okay with that, but much more than that, and I don't think I'd be able to justify it, honestly. Number 9, Shadow Dragon. So I feel like this one is just a little bit more faithful than I would have liked it to be. Now, I know that somebody right now is mad. They're eyeing that Echoes in slot number 2. But I feel like, given Fire Emblem 12, that this one had a little bit more potential than what they actually did with it. Now, the story, they didn't have a lot to work with here. I'm going to be honest. They didn't have a whole lot to work with. They're working with the original Famicom Fire Emblem 1, right? But the reason that I put this higher than some of the other games is that for as little as they had to work with, they sure did their very best to capitalize with it, especially with the writing. I find it very charming in a way, for as little dialogue as there actually is, and for as little as a lot of the side characters have to say, they at least make the most of it. They usually have something witty to say, or something charming or endearing in some fashion, even if they may not have another line for the rest of the game. And I think there's something to be said for that. The main storyline writing itself, again, it's pretty good. And for the gameplay, I mean, the adjustable difficulty is a really nice addition for players of all skill levels, right? So you can be brand new to the game, or you can be as hardcore with this one as you want to be. And it also included all of the previously mentioned gameplay features that are in New Mystery as well. And I think there's a lot of fun potential there too. Not a bad game by any stretch of the imagination, and certainly not as horrible as some people would have you believe. And I think that the reception of this game has improved a lot over the more recent years. But still, kind of like with Fire Emblem 7, there's nothing with this game that really stands out to me to make me go, wow. You know what I mean? It just doesn't have that wow factor to it, and I think that that's what's really holding it back for me personally. And for the hardcore players, while Hard 5 is a definite step in the right direction, New Mystery does so much more to increase the difficulty of each map other than just increasing the stats of the enemies. Now, Lunatic on New Mystery definitely increased the stats more, but from what I can recall, Hard 5 and Shadow Dragon is literally just the original maps with the original enemy placements and the original enemy reinforcements cranked up to 11 with their stats. And I feel like a little bit more could have been done to make that a standout difficulty. But it's hard. It's hard, don't get me wrong. But it's nowhere near New Mystery level. And that's a little bit disappointing for me, personally. Coming in at number 10, if nobody was mad before, they certainly are now. We have Fire Emblem Awakening. If Shadow Dragon suffered for being a little bit too bare bones, then this game is like a smorgasbord of options, because they threw everything but the kitchen sink at this one. They brought back skills, they brought back the child mechanic, they brought back Tiki, you can recruit Anna. This whole thing is just like one giant love letter to Fire Emblem. And I think that makes a lot of sense in hindsight, considering that this was quite possibly to be the last game in the series, had it not done as well as it had. Let me be clear, I do like this game. I think it's a perfectly fine game. I really don't like the gameplay, honestly, and that's what kills it for me. If the gameplay would have been good, I think that I would have honestly rated this one higher. But the way it breaks down for me is this. Great entry point for anybody who's never played Fire Emblem, right? It's not going to bother somebody who's pretty inexperienced. Maybe this was your first game. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But as you play more and more of the games, you'll start to notice that a lot of the maps in this game are very, very open. And I know if nobody was mad yet, they're really pissed at that Echo's rating now. But a lot of the maps in this game are very open, but they overwhelm you with such a large number of enemies that almost every single encounter breaks down to a stat check. Now, if you don't know what I mean by that, I essentially mean that the gameplay comes down to how good is my Juggernaut, how good is my best unit, and can they take on this wave of enemies with no help? And if the answer is yes, you win the fight, you win the map. If the answer is no, it becomes almost impossible to win. And I think that that's a ridiculous way to design a game. It's not very fun and engaging to do that. Now, on normal and hard mode, that's not necessarily so much a problem, I would say. I'm personally in the camp where hard mode is a little bit too easy in my opinion, but lunatic mode is just ridiculous, and it's not hard for the right reasons. Because again, it goes back to that whole stat check mentality where if you can pass the benchmark, you win the map, but if you can't, have fun with that, kid. I feel like an intermediate difficulty between the two of them would have helped that, but it still wouldn't fix the core issues with the map design itself, of which there's very little. Now, I've heard that some of the DLC chapters and side missions you can do are in fact a lot better, but I don't feel that it's really fair to include that in my rating of this because I didn't have any of that stuff available to me when I first played this game, and I don't feel like it's fair to include a DLC or any other content that you might not have access to when really assessing the game's flaws, you feel me? And Fire Emblem Awakening, just the gameplay, it could have been better. I'll put it at that. But a lot of the concepts that they brought in were interesting. I don't think that the story is as bad as people say it is either. I do find some of the characters to be entertaining. It's a perfectly solid game. I would even go as far as to say it's a good game, but maybe not the best Fire Emblem game. Number 11, Fire Emblem Fates Conquest. And we are going to be making distinctions for these ones because they are all three entirely different beasts. Now, I'm not even going to get into this. I really don't think it's worth it to even get into this. So I'm going to make this one short, simple, and to the point. The gameplay is good. The gameplay is good. And the reason that it's so low is everything else. Oh, barring the music. The music's also pretty good too. There were some bangers in there, no doubt. But if not for the gameplay and a handful of the tracks that I really love, ooh, you know? And that's not to hate on anybody who really enjoys this game. Maybe you really do find yourself connected to the characters. Maybe you did really enjoy the plot. That's great if that works for you. Not at all for me. I'm sorry. Coming in at number 12, we have Fire Emblem Birthright. Conquest without the gameplay. Now, I will say that the story is a little bit more tolerable on this route, and it's one of those things where if you personally found yourself attached to this set of characters more than the Conquest set of characters, then I could understand the reasoning for maybe flip-flopping those two. There were some better moments on this route, at least in compared to Conquest. I thought that Xander's suicide, well, let's be honest, he definitely committed suicide. I thought that was kind of interesting. I think that maybe they shouldn't. Oh, this is a tough spot because normally I would say that it's a good thing that it was left so ambiguous, but given the quality of Fate's writing, I feel like they probably should have clarified, because there's a chance that it wasn't even meant to be like that, just because the rest of the writing was so bad. I feel like it probably was implied to be a suicide, but who really knows? Who really knows? Spoiler warning. Other than that, though, there wasn't really anything about this game that really did anything for me at all. I found the characters in Awakening to be more endearing, so Despite the fact that I don't think either of these games have particularly good gameplay, I have to give the edge to Awakening in that regard. And of the Fates trio, Conquest definitely has the best gameplay of the three, so I have to rate that one higher as well. And coming in dead last, this should be a surprise to no one, Fire Emblem Fates Revelation. Birthright, but with gimmicks. Everything from the snow shoveling simulator to the elevators. This game is just bad. All around bad. There's only a handful, a very small selection of maps within this entire game that I would consider playable. Honestly, this is probably one of the least fun I've ever had with any game. Any game that, at least any game that's supposedly supposed to be from a good series. And I've played Final Fantasy II. I had more fun with Final Fantasy II than I did with Revelation. Just to give you a perspective, if in case you don't know anything about Final Fantasy II, that is like the black sheep of that series. Generally regarded as the worst in that series. And I had a much better time with that game than I ever did with Revelation. By the end of the game, I just said screw it. I started letting people die left and right. I did not care, and that just doesn't happen to me when I'm playing these games. Even with Birthright, I was motivated to, at the very least, put in the bare minimum of effort to keep everybody alive. But with Revelation, man, I just did not care. And it has the worst story of the three, without a doubt. And on top of that, it's the canon route. And on top of that, you have to pay an extra $15 just to play it. So yeah, this is a really bad game. Don't play it. Probably the only Fire Emblem that I would say is just genuinely not worth money. It's a bad game. Oh my god, that was an endurance round, man. So with that out of the way... Oh, what's this? Oh. I'm sorry, but Tearing Saga just takes all the best aspects from the other games and throws them into one nice little complete package, in my opinion. It's got really fun gameplay, albeit it is a little bit clunky. The soundtrack is very good, above average at the very worst, I would say. The story, oh my god, the story. Now, not necessarily the narrative itself, but the way it goes about telling this story. What it does with the characters, oh my god, you will know every last detail down to what they ate for breakfast if you play this game. This game makes no effort to spare even these tiniest of details, and that's something that I love an incredible amount. Just so much effort put into even the lowliest of characters. Don't believe me? Okay, let's just take any old random character here. Julia. Julia will do just fine. Okay, so Julia. Any other game, she would just be some random sword fighter who joins you in Chapter 2. That'd probably be the end of that. Maybe a support here or there. Get a little bit more backstory, but in Tearing Saga, no, not at all. Not at all. I think I know more about this woman than I know about myself at this point. So, okay, let's start here. Let's just see where we end up by the end of all of this. Okay, here we go. Julia, adopted daughter of this badass and adopted sister of this smartass. Wants to become a master swordswoman someday, but develops a bit of a drinking problem because she feels as though she's not really up to par. Was saved from a pirate attack by a man working under this guy, who is the father of this beautiful man right here. When you first meet her, it just seems as though she's some sort of wandering sellsword, but it actually turns out that she witnessed a high-level political assassination and was then framed by the true culprit, who is this douche. And then this douche went and hired this guy to go keep her quiet. But then it turns out that this guy, upon fighting Julia, finds out that she's not such a bad person, and now they're both pissed at this guy. Then you have the option of sending her with either Holmes, where she can meet up with this guy, and get a little bit of closure on her personal problems, or you can send her along with Runin, where who else but this douche right here turns out to be one of the final bosses in that arc. And she can finally get her revenge on this douche once and for all, or you can send Vega, he can do it too. The point I'm trying to make here is, everybody is connected. There's nobody here that's just a standalone character. Everybody is somehow related to the world that... Everybody's related to the world that he's trying to build here. Everybody's related to somebody or something. Nothing just is in this game, and I love that fact. I love the fact that there's always something new to learn, and even on repeated playthroughs, you'd be hard-pressed to make all of the same decisions and see all of the same scenes, and it's just so amazing. And did I mention that most of this stuff that I'm talking about you would learn naturally through the story as it progresses. There's no spending 500 turns next to one another to build supports here for X number of maps and build up some invisible point meter so that you can advance to the next point of this character's storyline. No, this all just happens naturally throughout the game as you visit certain locations, as you complete certain tasks. More and more of their background becomes revealed to you as you play the game, and I think that that's the best way to possibly do it. It's the best possible way to do it because it makes everything feel connected. It makes it feel as though everything has a purpose, and that's something that I feel the mainline series hasn't exactly captured yet. So yeah, too long didn't listen. Tearing Saga, the greatest. Icelerate says, congratulations on reaching 1,000 subscribers. I hope to see this number increase tenfold. You and me both, buddy. Thank you. I do appreciate that. He then goes on to ask, who are your favorite Fire Emblem lords? I've already did my Tearing Saga thing, so let's go ahead and just assume that it's gonna be Holmes. But for the main series, I'm gonna go ahead and give the first slot to Ike. Now I've already kind of talked about Ike a little bit, but really I just like his whole attitude. I like the fact that he's not really a lord and he doesn't really want anything to do with that sort of higher status. And I think he's a really funny character too, like that scene where he first promotes and he's talking to the apostle and he goes, oh, okay, now if I'm gonna be nobility, do I have to wear a funny hat or something like that? And I remember dying the first time I saw that because that's just funny. There's just something so likable about this guy. He's a little bit more relatable, I suppose, because he's not really anybody special. He's just a mercenary, you know? And he keeps it 100 at all times, and I think that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I like Hector for a lot of similar reasons. He doesn't feel like a noble, honestly. He just feels like a guy with a bit of a temper, you know what I mean? And that's kind of endearing in a way. If I had to pick a more traditional lord, I guess I would give it to Leaf, just because I feel like he struggles the most throughout his game. And I like the fact that by the end of it, he comes to terms with the fact that although he might not be as powerful as somebody like Celeste or Seti or what have you, he can still help out and contribute in his own way, and I think that's cool. I think that's pretty cool. Green Poolball asks, have you got a chance to play Fire Emblem 6 Redux? If so, what do you think about it, and will it ever be a future Let's Play? I'll say I don't know for a fact that it'll ever be a future Let's Play, but, you know, never rule out the possibility. I have played it. I have played it a long time ago, so I'm sorry if I can't really give specific impressions and whatnot, but from what I remember, it mostly aimed to fix a lot of the balancing issues within Fire Emblem 6, such as incredibly low hit rates on lances and axes, and some of the characters being horribly unbalanced and almost completely unusable on hard mode without serious babying, arena abuse, boss abuse, or whatever have you. And I'll say that I agree with most of those changes. I can't really recall anything specific off the top of my head, but I do know that it was made by the same person who is currently making the Fire Emblem 10 Redux. So I'm gonna go ahead and say that I probably think it's good. Again, sorry, I haven't played it in a very long time. But if his current projects are anything to go by, I think that it's probably a step in the right direction overall. Big Robbie says, I would want to know how to analyze and approach Fire Emblem maps in game since I am struggling on Lunatic Conquest. That's sort of a complex one. I really haven't put as much thought into this kind of thing as you might think. But I think that it really boils down to a few things, really. One, I like to know what it is I'm doing on each particular map. And I mean, that seems like an obvious one, right? But I like to know what my objectives are, be it to seize the throne, defeat the boss, rout the enemy. And I also like to keep in mind what other sort of side things that I might want to get along the way, like treasures or what have you. And then from there I usually like to think about what kind of things are standing in my way. You know, is the boss room full of really powerful enemies, so I should probably send my strongest fighter? Or is the treasure chest that I really want to get, is that being checked by some kind of siege tome, so maybe I should be sending a high movement unit off to get rid of them before I send my thief in so that they can safely get what I want to get. Then of course it's pretty worthwhile to actually look at the enemy stats, and I know that's not necessarily the most exciting thing to do, but it does help out in deciding who can one-round KO what, who can take hits, that sort of thing. What kind of enemies are there to deal with? Am I dealing with magic enemies? Maybe I want somebody with some decent res so that they can take a few magical hits if I need them to. Maybe I can't one-round KO the boss, but if I give them this strength tonic, all of a sudden I can. You know, that sort of thing. Maybe I'm just a point of speed away from being able to double this guy. All of these kinds of things are the sort of questions that I usually tend to ask myself before I even begin the map. And if the answer to any of these are no, like, no, I can't one-round KO this guy, no, I can't double this enemy right here, no, I can't take 2 hits or whatever, I usually try to ask myself, well, is there anything I can do about that? Especially in a game like Fates, or even Fire Emblem 12, where there's a lot of things you can do to mitigate that sort of thing. Let's use Fates as an example. Maybe I can't take 2 hits, but if I were to buy a health tonic from the shop, all of a sudden that plus 5 HP makes it so that I can. Or maybe I'm just a little bit too weak, but with this strength tonic that I bought, you know, or with the mess hall boost or something like that, all of a sudden now I can. And that's going to make the whole experience a lot smoother. Because in a game like that in particular, now this is more of a specific sort of response, but in a game like that, where enemies are generally fairly strong, the difference between getting rid of an enemy in one round versus having to use multiple units to kill one enemy is pretty big. It's pretty big, so generally you would want to spend as few turns as possible, or you would want to spend as few units as possible to kill as many things as possible. Generally speaking, of course. Depends a little bit on the situation at hand, but that's generally how I like to think about it. And as for what my best units are doing, I think that's usually that's usually the biggest part of what's going to decide how the pace of the map is going to go, right? Because, well, let me give you an example. If I'm playing Conquest, I know that Ashura, Corrin, Camilla, Xander, those are the best units that I have available, so I want to make sure that I'm getting the absolute most out of them every single turn. Every single action they take should be something that is somehow helping me to achieve some goal I have for that map, be it just beating the map, be it getting some sort of treasure chest, side objective, whatever, that would otherwise be really hard to get, but is also a really useful thing to have that'll make the rest of the game easier, you know, that sort of thing. I kind of think of it like, I think of each unit's action as sort of like a currency, in a way. So like, Azura, Corrin, Camilla, Xander, etc., they're the Benjamins, baby. Those are the $100 bills. You're not going to go down to the dollar store and spend that on a pack of gum, you know what I mean? You want every single thing that you do with those guys to count, because they can do the most. They're your best units. It only makes sense that they can get the most done, compared to some of your lesser characters who might need more experience or room to grow or what have you. Not to say that those other characters are worthless, no. You want to make sure that you're getting very important things done with your best units. It only makes sense, right? On the other side of this, you'd have a character like Odin, and he's like... Let me be specific. You would have Odin in his join chapter specifically. Now, if you train him up after this, maybe he can go into something. But specifically in his join chapter on Lunatic, Odin's like the dollar bill, man. It doesn't really matter what he's going to be doing here. At best, he's maybe drawing in some other enemies so that you can finish him off with some other infantry, maybe doing a little bit of chip damage here. But the idea is that generally what you do with him isn't quite as important, because what he can do isn't as important, right? He's not one-round KOing enemies left and right. He's not a tank. His movement's not particularly great, so he's not amazing at going out of his way to get side objectives or anything like that. And again, you can raise him up to be a capable unit in his own right, but I'm talking strictly on his join map here. If you kind of think of each action that you're taking as a trade of some kind, it's a lot easier for me to personally rationalize my moves and try to make sure that I'm getting the most out of each character with regards to what they can actually contribute to the map itself. Does that make sense? I don't know if that's making sense or not, but that's just how I think of it anyways. I guess to give kind of a visual example of what I'm talking about, though, just in case anybody's having a little bit of trouble following this, on the last part of my Fire Emblem 12 playthrough, I did the map where you recruit Navarre, and you have to take out a whole bunch of thieves, and they have a bunch of really good treasure that you would generally want to get and whatnot. And I ended up sending the Avatar specifically all the way to the north, because he was the only one who could both one-round KO the thieves, as well as take hits from hunters, despite the fact that he was a flying unit. And that's kind of what I mean by the fact that he's the Benjamin, right? Only he can do that. Nobody else that I had on my team was capable of doing something like that. So it only made sense to use him for that job, because absolutely nobody else could get it done. And it was important to my goals, being 1, beating the map, and 2, getting all the treasure. So maybe that helps to have a little bit more of a visual example. And one big thing that I think helps, at least to help me personally, and it's something that even as somebody who played a lot of the games, I only recently started doing, probably since I started posting a lot of these playthroughs, to be honest. But one big thing that I sort of changed my mentality on was how I actually looked at the maps. So I used to look at them as just one big thing, you know, just one big objective to tackle. But lately, I've been looking at them more as sort of individual sections or individual encounters when looking at the enemies and the enemies' placement and whatnot. Now, if you're trying to tackle the map as a whole, right from the preparation screen, that can be really, really tricky. But if you're looking at each individual group of enemies as their own separate entity, it can be a lot easier to plan around how you're actually going to handle that situation when the time comes. So I think that also helps out a lot. And as for conquest-specific things, pair up tonics and the mess hall, man. Those things are very, very broken. Very broken. +2 to a stat might not sound like a whole lot, but it can definitely make the difference in a lot of cases. And if that isn't enough, you can always throw a mess hall boost on top of that. Try to get Perry as the chef. Give her the chef's hat. I know a lot of people don't like Perry, but she's apparently a really good cook. And it definitely reflects in gameplay. I think she always gives a bonus. I think she always gives a bonus if she's the chef, right? So I would definitely do that as soon as possible. Other than that, it's really just experience, man. Lunatic Conquest is no joke. Definitely one of the more difficult games in the series. I mean, I can't lie about that. Ronan says, I know he said this before, but congrats on the sub count. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Anyways, as for questions, why can't Metroid crawl? Because Adam didn't authorize it. There's an other M joke for you. Okay, man, I'm sorry. I really can't answer all of these. I know there's a few repeats in here, so I'm gonna try to stick to the ones that are more unique to this. And if I don't get to the specific question that you were looking for an answer for, man, just like PM me or something. But I'm already at over an hour. I don't know if it's gonna be over an hour by this point when I edit it down, but just know, like, we gotta keep this moving a little bit here. So, progress on the Sacred Stones Plus mod. I'm gonna be perfectly honest, more or less halted for the time being. I'd really rather focus on putting time and effort into this rather than to that particular project. And not because I don't want to do it or not because I feel like it's not something worth doing, but I feel like hacking is just a very time-consuming thing, and I just don't necessarily know that I have the time to do both. And if I had to pick one or the other, it's gonna be this. This is something that I really enjoy, and it's something that other people can enjoy immediately. There's also a few hiccups with the actual skill system and whatnot that I was using in it, and it's just a matter of the fact that it's just a matter of it not being in an easily modifiable state right now. At least not the most up-to-date version. If I were to use the old version with all these bugs and less skills and whatnot, I could probably get something similar to what I would have liked to do accomplished sooner or later, but I'd really just rather wait until there's a version that has most of the notable bugs ironed out and is easily modifiable so that I can do whatever I want to do, you know, have free reign over it. So for the time being, unfortunately, I'm just going to say I wouldn't expect it anytime soon. What are some of your future playthrough ideas? Now that would be spoilers, my friend. Just kidding. I really have been thinking about redoing the Final Fantasy Tactics playthrough at some point. I don't know when exactly, but it's definitely something that I want to return to now that I feel a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more experienced. And I feel like I can add a little bit more to that than I did on my first attempt, let's call it, I guess, for lack of a better word. Keeping on the Final Fantasy train, I recently got the HD remaster of Final Fantasy X, and I was thinking about, like, I'm probably going to do a no sphere grid run of that at some point. And I don't know if I'd record it necessarily, but it's something that I've been thinking about doing just because I like that game. It was one of the games from my childhood that I have fond memories of, and I know there's problems with it and whatnot, but I honestly think that overall it's a pretty solid game, honestly. I think that just about anybody who enjoys RPGs can jump into that and have a decent enough time with it. Some of the story stuff is a little bit silly, yeah, but I mean, we play Fire Emblem. I play Fire Emblem at least, and I don't know if we've been playing the same game or not, but some of this stuff gets ridiculous, man. Kind of like the Final Fantasy X thing. I don't know if I would record this one necessarily, but a game that I've definitely been having my eye on lately would be something from the Persona series. I haven't really sat down and played any of those games. Now, I did actually play Persona 4 a little bit when one of my buddies from high school lent me that way back in the day. I didn't get to finish it, though. I only got up to the bathhouse stage. Yeah, there's a bathhouse stage in this game. I know that probably makes that probably sounds really weird to anybody who hasn't actually played this game. But I remember really liking the little bit of it that I did play. Again, it's one of those really long games, though, so I don't know if I would necessarily want to record it or not. I don't know. It's kind of a toss-up for me. It's definitely been a series I've been looking at, though. Again, I don't know if I would necessarily record that or not, but it's something interesting that I'm probably going to do in my free time at some point. I would kill to be able to play Echoes, honestly. That would be one of the first things that I would do if I ever got the capability to record 3DS stuff, honestly. I'd probably do the other games too, because I know there's like randomizers for Awakening and crap. But yeah, Echoes would be one that I would really love to be able to play through for this channel, just because I feel like, and again, there's a question specifically relating to this game later, but I feel like I'm the only one who just thinks it's a good day. I feel like I'm the only one who thinks it's just a good game, no pause, no but after that statement. I just think it's a good game, full stop. So I would love to be able to do that and actually have the ability to sit down and share perspective on that in context. Other than that, I was thinking about some shorter games too, like just random crap that I used to play growing up and whatnot. A lot of those games are quite a bit shorter than what I usually post, so if I did do something like that, it would be, you know, a few parts at most, rather than the 10, 20, 30 plus parts that you guys might be used to, especially considering I would still like to keep it, you know, an hour or so per session and whatnot. And of course there are still other games in this series that I do have the capability to record right now, that of course I still want to get around to someday. But man, I would kill to be able to play Echoes, dude. If this ever became profitable, I would definitely spend the first little bit of money on some kind of 3DS capturing software, like no doubt, no doubt. What are your favorite games that exclude Fire Emblem? Yeah, Mega Man X and A Link to the Past are both pretty high up there. I also have a pretty big soft spot for Symphony of the Night. That was one game that I played the absolute hell out of back in the day, dude. And then finding out that there was a whole second half to that game, that just blew my little 8-year-old mind, let me tell you. I had a friend who had that game too, so we would just spend nights after nights after nights at each other's houses just trying to get every item, trying to uncover every tile of the map, and just doing everything we possibly could do in that game. And that's one of the best games of all time, honestly. There's almost nothing wrong with it. The only thing you could really argue is that it's maybe a little bit too easy. But from the soundtrack just to the way that the game itself actually works, it's all really good stuff. All really good stuff. Definitely something that I would recommend to anybody who enjoys that sort of exploration style gameplay mixed in with a few RPG elements. And it's got the whole gothic horror type feel to it too, and that's something that I really enjoy. So it's a cool game. I mean, what can really be said about it? It's held as one of the all-time classics for a reason, right? Another game that I play way too frequently and can't believe that I still play 20 years later is Sonic 3 and Knuckles for the Sega Genesis. I remember seeing Sonic and Knuckles for the first time at my cousin's house, because I had Sonic 3, right, but I didn't know that Sonic and Knuckles was a thing. So I go over there, and they're playing entirely new levels, and I'm just like, what the hell is this? It was the coolest thing I had ever seen. My little 4-year-old self could hardly contain it, and I imagine that I must have bugged the hell out of my parents, because I do actually have the game still. But for whatever reason, every few years or so, I find myself going back to that game, and it's just like, not exactly the most complex game in the world, but damn if it's not fun. Also, the lockout technology blew my mind, man. I'd never seen anything like that. Keeping on the Sega Genesis nostalgia train, Comic Zone, a game that nobody has heard of, but it is, it's like a side-scrolling beat-em-up game, kind of like Streets of Rage in a sense, but it's like it's on a 2D plane, so it's like more old school like that, I guess Street Fighter-like in a way. Ball-bustingly difficult game, awesome aesthetic, and amazing music as well. I don't know why, but I really like this game. I really always enjoyed it. It's just something. It's another one of those games that I can go back to, and again, it's probably not something that everybody would enjoy. If you're a fan of those old school style games that just take no prisoners and kick your ass from the word go, it's definitely a fun one, and it's one that I never hear anybody talk about, especially when they're talking about, you know, old school games, classic games from the 90s and whatnot. But that was one that I had and I always really enjoyed. Speaking of the 90s, though, Squaresoft in general for the 90s, they could do no wrong. I don't know why, I don't know how they pulled it off. But everything from Final Fantasy IV to Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy Tactics, whatever, you name it, I probably really like it. And Pokemon is also a game that I still find myself playing. Not so much the games themselves, actually. I haven't even played Sun and Moon, or Ultra Sun and Moon for that matter. But I really still do enjoy the competitive side of it. And that's something that I find myself doing occasionally. Usually I'll play it for like a week, maybe 2 weeks or something like that. Then I'll get into a battle with somebody, and it won't be their fault or anything, but they'll just destroy me in the most unfair way. Like, I'll miss every move. They'll get every single bit of hacks that they possibly need to destroy me. I'll have the game won, and they'll try to like sack their one and only win condition, and I won't expect them to do it. And then I'll get tilted, and then I'll lose all of my points, and then I'll get salty, and then I won't play for like 2 months. And then I'll come back to it and do it again. The vicious cycle of competitive Pokemon, man. Like old school platformer, Super Mario World, that's another game I really love. But who doesn't love Super Mario World? You're a madman if you don't think that's at least a decent game. Oh, Metal Gear Solid. Metal Gear Solid is a series that I absolutely love, just because it's so ridiculous. Honestly, I could spend hours and hours and hours talking about that one, but just know that I have a great affinity for that whole title. For just about every game in that series, I would say is phenomenal. At least the first 4. I haven't really gotten around to beating Phantom Pain. It didn't hold my interest, I'm gonna be honest. I was a little bit disappointed with that one, but it's one of those games where the gameplay is really fun, but really for me personally, I'm playing it for the story, to just see how crazy and how wild things actually get, because those games, oh my god. If you haven't played them, it's definitely an experience. It's definitely an experience, and there is a good reason, in my opinion, as to why Metal Gear Solid is held as like one of the all-time gold standards of anything related to the PlayStation 1. Definitely a good game. Definitely a good game. To continue the 90s kick even further, let's throw out The Legend of Dragoon as well. Pretty interesting RPG. Has a really strange and unique combat system where you have to do like timed hits. Like if you've ever played any of the Super Mario RPG games, it's sort of like that, but you can actually do combo hits. And depending on how well you execute those, you'll do more damage or do special moves and whatnot. And that was always a really cool game to me. Pretty basic for an RPG plot and whatnot, but as far as 90s RPGs goes, this is a very 90s RPG, if you feel me. If you only ever played like Final Fantasy and crap, never really give this one a look. I think it's a worthwhile adventure. Pretty long, 4 discs, which is like honestly that's like the standard length of an RPG back then. But I remember playing this one. I remember going out to friends' houses and playing it too. Like I don't know why, but it seemed like everybody that I knew had this game, but then turned to find out it's not even that popular. I don't know. I had a good time with it though. I go back to it every now and again. Phoenix Wright, the whole series. Now this is a game I didn't know that I would like when I first played it. It had to have been like, oh god, it's 2018. like 10 years ago when I played the first one. And I didn't really know what to expect. I think I saw some meme or something like that of the objection sequence. If you don't know what Phoenix Wright is, you basically step into the shoes of a lawyer. It's like a visual novel series where you're going around solving murder mysteries and whatnot. And I didn't know what to expect of it, but honestly, this is one of my favorite games ever, with ease. I don't really want to get too much into it because it's such a story-driven game. And really, a lot of the enjoyment is going to come from the twists and the turns along the way, and just getting into really getting into it and trying to figure out who done it, you know what I mean? It doesn't sound like much on paper, but really the world and the characters just have so much life breathed into them by the excellent, fantastic, amazing writing. And I think that's really the big selling point. And thank God, dude, because it's a lot of reading. It's a lot of reading, but if you're into that sort of thing, definitely give that game a look. The soundtrack is phenomenal too. It actually has no right to be that good in my opinion, but it's amazing. Every single one of the games seems to be trying to outdo one another, which is how zany and how ridiculous the storylines and soundtracks can be. Somehow it's just so oddly satisfying to put the pieces together and solve these cases for yourself. And honestly, this game is almost certainly always going to hold a special place in my heart. Also, you cross-examine a parent. Yeah, I don't know what that has to do with anything, but I just thought I would mention that. This game is ridiculous, man. But probably not as ridiculous as Danganronpa, another visual novel murder mystery series that I happen to really enjoy. It's basically Phoenix Wright, but in anime form, more or less. That's really all it is. I can't really talk about it too much without getting into details, and that's not good because this game is just, again, it's so story heavy that any kind of spoilers can really take away enjoyment from people who would want to play it. The setup, though, is pretty simple. You're basically trapped inside this high school along with, I think, 14 other people. And you're trying to find a way out. And then it's revealed that you've actually been kidnapped. And you're forced into this sort of, like, sick killing game where you basically have to try and get away with murder. And anybody who succeeds in getting away with murder is allowed to leave what is essentially a prison at this point. It's an interesting game. It's an interesting game. I can't really go into it too much more than that. But it's full of anime ridiculousness, no doubt. I think that the first game is actually my favorite in the series because it's the most grounded, and I think that later on they kind of go off the rails. Not to say that this one isn't pretty ridiculous in its own right, but I think that I enjoyed the cast of characters in the first game the most, so that might have something to do with it as well. Again, much like Phoenix Wright, it might not sound like much, but it was one of those games where I found myself not being able to put it down. I always had to know what happened next, man. And for some reason, much like Phoenix Wright, the soundtrack is amazing. I don't know what is up with these visual novels having outstanding soundtracks, but there you go. Favorite FE songs? Ooh, I really like at least one song from each game, so I guess we can just do something like that. So Fire Emblem 1, Together We Ride, and A Knight's Oath. Also Map 2, because it's not Map 1, and goddamn if I wasn't sick of Map 1 by the time I got to the end of the game. Gaiden. With Mila's Divine Protection, and also the final map theme. Love those two a lot. Mystery of the Emblem. Again, Together We Ride, A Knight's Oath. I'm not sure what it's called, but the theme that plays before each chapter in Book 2. Holy War. And not the game. There's a song in Fire Emblem 3 called Holy War. I like that one a lot. Okay, now actually Genealogy of the Holy War. Basically every map theme is really good, but if I had to give it to one, I guess Final Holy War, which is the final map theme. I also really like the recruitment theme in that game too. Thracia, Adversity is good. It's basically one of the better oh shit themes in the series, honestly. The recruitment theme is good. I like a lot of the music that plays during the storyline sequences as well, like before map dialogues and whatnot. I like both battle themes in this game as well. I like the player phase one, and the enemy phase one is just hectic, crazy, and chaotic. I'm not sure what most of these are called. Actually, no, wait, I do know this one. The attack theme is called Applying Justice, which is probably the most hardcore thing I've ever heard. So I love it for that and that alone. Fire Emblem 6, Beneath the Sky and Within the Magnificent Nature are both two really, really good map themes. I also like, I don't remember what it's called, but the final map theme. Let me look it up. Hold up. Okay, it's called The Path to Greatness. The Path to Greatness. That's what it was. I also like the Fire Emblem Gaiden remix in that game. I know it's a little bit cheating, but I do not care. It's a good theme no matter what game it's in, man. And all the boss themes in this game are really good too. Fire Emblem 7. Inescapable Fate is, in my opinion, the best oh shit map theme ever in Fire Emblem. You know, as a matter of fact, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm going to go ahead and amend my previous statement on my placement of Fire Emblem 7. Go ahead and switch that one with Fire Emblem 6, because now that I'm thinking about it, the entire endgame is full of this theme, and like, not only that, but they do such a good job of making you feel like the stakes just got raised. Like, from Cog of Destiny until the end of the game, that game just kicks it up to 100. So yeah, I don't know how I got onto that topic. Other themes I like from that game, Dragon's Gate 2, Going My Way. Just because it's such a troll theme, and it reminds me of Sarah, who herself is just a great, fantastic character. Hilarious. I love her and Urk's interactions. They never fail to make me laugh. Fire Emblem 8, most of it. Most of it, honestly. Comrades, the recruitment theme, that's a really good one. Determination, that's a good one too. I noticed I like a lot of the map themes in this series, but I think that's probably a good thing considering you hear those the most, so I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. Follow Me, Ephraim's map theme, when you play as him for the first time in 5X. Truth, Despair, and Hope, obviously a really good one. Land of Promise, oh my god. Fire Emblem 9, I really didn't like a lot of the map themes in this game, at least compared to the previous entries in the series, but I did like a change of scenery. That one was a pretty good one. That's the one that plays during Oliver's arc. Of course, Oliver would have the best map theme in the series, or in the series he says. He would have the best map themes in the game related to him. Why would he not? Also, of course, I like the Black Knights theme. Both the slower version and the in-battle version. Both of those are pretty kick-ass. Very powerful, very imposing. Fire Emblem 10, I feel like, does a little bit better of a job in the music department. So Bearer of Hope, right? The song that plays during Alencia's Gambit in 313, that's a banger. I love that one. It only plays twice, which is a bit of a shame, but if they had overused it, it probably wouldn't have had the same impact, so I guess that's a good thing. I like Conviction, which is the song that played in like the later half of part 1. That was a pretty good one. Oliver's battle theme is obviously amazing. I can't remember what... Yes, I can. Beauty is a Mad Mistress. Oliver's theme. Pretty kick-ass battle theme, am I right? I have no idea why his is so awesome, but it is, and there you go. In fact, just about all of the character themes, or the character-exclusive battle themes anyways, are really, really good. Wheeling Corby, I like that one a lot. That's Nasala's theme, just so we're all on the same page. The Lion King's theme is really good, obviously. And I really like the Crimean Royal Knights attack theme, which was On Glory's Wings. That's the name of it. I don't know why, but that's the one that stuck out to me the most. Oh, they're all pretty good. Like I said, I think the Fire Emblem 10 did a lot better in the music department. Shadow Dragon. Honestly, the map things in this game are pretty good, but damn if I can remember the name of even a single one of them. Kind of sucks. I guess I need to refresh myself on this one a little bit more. But I do know that this is a pretty decent soundtrack. But I can't remember it. I can't remember. I can remember the tunes, but not the names, man. New Mystery. Again, all of the map themes. Holy War is really good in this version. It's very, very different than the Fire Emblem 3 version. You can almost see it being a different song, but it's pretty obvious that the melody is the same. Just the way that they went about composing it, though, is very, very different, so I like that. If I had to pick one, Endless Battle, I guess. Yeah, Endless Battle is probably one of my favorites. I also really like the Thracia remix that they use in this game. Doesn't show up very often, but damn, I was blown away by that. I'm glad that that game actually gets a little bit of love every now and then. Awakening. I'm going to be really boring and just say id purpose. Oh, I also like Chaos, both the regular battle theme and also the Ablaze version. Those are both really, really good. Oh, and Conquest. Conquest, both versions. Both the regular one and the Ablaze version. Really, really good tracks in my opinion. Fates. Pass Below and Road Taken. Yeah, Pass Below and Road Taken are two that I really like. Both versions of those tracks as well. A Darkfall and a Light. Hey, I said one good thing about Birthright. Yeah, both versions of those songs also. Echoes. Every single theme in the game just about. Yeah, I actually can't think of a song in that game that I don't like, so... yeah. It's a really good game, guys, I swear. Favorite Fire Emblem character archetype? Definitely the Jagan. Without any doubt, it's gotta be the Jagan archetype. Every single one of these guys is such a badass, and I don't know what it is, but there's just something so cool to me about the experienced veteran that helps out the newbies as they're struggling to learn the ropes, you know what I mean? They always have a lot of wisdom, and they usually tend to help out the Lord when it comes to more difficult scenarios, and that was something that I really cool. They're like an advisor and a best friend in a way, you know what I mean? Maybe Sigurd, Titania, and Seth don't really count, but they fill the same role in the story and whatnot, and the same use gameplay-wise, so I would go ahead and count them too. Every one of them is a bunch of badasses. And if you don't like the Jagan, I wish you the best of luck, especially if you're going to go ahead and try and play Fire Emblem 6 on hard mode. No, really, I do. Good luck, man. You're going to need it. Any collaborations you want to do with your community? I don't know if it would be a collaboration necessarily, but I would enjoy playing like multiplayer games and stuff like that. Of course, I am a broke boy, so that's something to keep in mind. Hit that like button so that I'm not a broke boy. Definitely wouldn't mind like doing some competitive Pokemon or something like that with some of you guys, because I know by now there's at least a few people that are familiar with the game, or at least people that wouldn't mind learning, because I have posted some of that stuff before, and people seem generally pretty interested, or at least the people that watched the video seemed interested, even if they didn't know what exactly was going on. So that would be something that I would like to do, and could easily do. Have the means to do it, that is to say. I wouldn't mind playing like Smash or something like that, but obviously I couldn't record that. And also, truth be told, the Wii U isn't mine, it's my sister's. I just own the game, so that would really be more on whether or not she's okay with that. Yeah, I mean, I'm open to the possibility of really anything. I would never say never on any of these kind of questions, honestly. Face reveal when? 10,000 subs. Get to it, boys! Worst and best maps. Whew, so worst maps, anything from Revelation is really bad. Like, seriously, you could line up every map in that game onto a dartboard, throw the dart, hit a random target, and it would probably be a terrible map. So I think we can just go ahead and include that entire game, save for like the final boss, which is actually pretty alright. We can also go ahead and throw in Chapter 3 from Fire Emblem 3/12 on there. The one where you have to go all the way around the mountain to recruit a character who's not even good. God damn it, Macus. And as much as I hate to say it, we can go ahead and throw in one from Echoes as well. Whatever that Archer 4 was, that one was garbage. That was honestly one of the only points in that game where I wasn't enjoying myself at all. that was just a bad map. And they did do a little bit to make it less tedious. I think that the deployment zones are slightly different, so you can have a better time getting to the fort, but it was still bad. It was still really bad. No getting around that one, unfortunately. Best maps is a little bit more interesting. I feel that most of the maps in this series tend to hit the mark more often than not. So with that in mind, I'm just gonna name a few of them that come to mind right off the top of my head. So if your favorite map's not on this, I don't know what to tell you. It doesn't necessarily mean that I think it's bad or anything, but this is just what comes to mind, you know? So one that comes to mind is Lionheart Eldigan from Fire Emblem 4. And I know that any kind of Fire Emblem 4 map on this list is kind of crazy in a way, but I think that this map does the best job out of every map in that game of really nailing the sort of gameplay that they were trying to go for, because you have to balance a lot of different things. Infantry isn't entirely pointless on this map. The story progression is pretty cool here. Lots of things go down on this map. Again, I don't want to get too deep into the story, but lots of cool things do happen in this chapter. You have to face a very, very powerful enemy, your first legendary weapon in the game, in fact. And he's quite the beast to take down if you didn't prepare adequately for this situation. The backtracking here is very, very minor, so it doesn't get in the way of the gameplay as it might in, say, Chapter 2, where it's a lot more noticeable. All in all, for a game with maps as big as Fire Emblem 4 has, there's plenty to do here. And the best part is you can beat it really, really quickly once you know what you're doing. Even I can beat it in like 10 turns, so there's also that. It's just one of those maps that I hope that the developers would look to if they ever do consider doing a Fire Emblem 4 remake in the future, because it really nails the gameplay, in my opinion. Another one that comes to my mind is Prologue 8 from Fire Emblem New Mystery, specifically on Maniac or above. This chapter is very puzzle-like in a way. The enemies are incredibly powerful relative to your own units, but it's really oddly satisfying to figure out how to take them on safely, and it's almost like a pseudo-defense mission in a way, because the enemies come at you in waves, and you're sort of backed against the wall at the start, but as you progress through the map, you push forward and forward and forward, and eventually reach the boss. It's a very satisfying feeling in order to take these guys on, and somehow and possibly they managed to make thieves a very threatening and a very dangerous enemy type, and I think that's cool. I think that's pretty cool. It's not really here so much for story reasons like the last one was. Well, the last one was for gameplay too, but partially for story reasons as well. But this one, I feel like, just sets the tone so well for what kind of game you're in for if you like to challenge yourself. Sets the tone for what kind of game you're in for if you are playing New Mystery on a higher difficulty mode. And even on hard mode, this can be a real bastard of a map. Despite the fact that this map, all in all, is pretty short, I think that it does a lot for what's actually there. I'm a person of the mindset that doesn't necessarily believe that more things equals better, and although this map is simple by design, that doesn't make it bad by any stretch of the imagination. And I think that the particular enemy placement and their equipment loadouts and everything that went into designing a challenging chapter is all here, all present, and the completed package is pretty fun, pretty interesting, and a good way to round out the prologue of that game. Chapter 10, Conquest. Now this is a chapter that probably doesn't surprise a whole lot of people. I will say that I'm not necessarily as wowed by this one as some other people may be. You know, I've played plenty of defense chapters in my day. Let me put it that way. But I think that the execution of this one is really good. It's very hectic, very fast-paced, especially if you're trying to get all of the different items that you can get. Takehi's Dragon Vein at the second half of the chapter is a real bastard move, but you also get Camilla in this map, and making use of her is very, very fun. Having her fly around Blitzaboro, Blitz Hinata, all of that good stuff. It's a fair challenge, especially on the first playthrough when you don't necessarily know what to expect. And it's definitely a good introduction to some of the more challenging elements that Fire Emblem as a whole, and Conquest in particular, will be throwing your way. So I think that in that sense, it definitely satisfies the requirements for what I would call a pretty good map. Pretty good map. The only thing I'd have to knock it for is setting it up as if it's a defense map, when in reality it's borderline a round map. If you play this map strictly playing defense, you're going to get screwed. You're going to get absolutely slammed from all directions, and that's not really the map's fault or anything. I think it's just a little bit misleading for a newer player. They're going to see that and think, okay, defense map, I better block this point. But in reality, what you want to do is go out there and kill as many enemies as possible. Again, that's not really to be held against the map or anything, though. Overall, solid map, solid experience, I would say. Another one, the first map. Like the first map ever. Not in Shadow Dragon, though. In Shadow Dragon on harder difficulty, this map kind of falls apart. But in the original game, in Old Mystery of the Emblem, I actually think that the very first map is a good example of map design, honestly. It shows you everything you need to know about the game without necessarily holding your hand. You could pretty much jump in and start playing, and you would figure things out more or less perfectly fine. It's not incredibly punishing or anything like that. You can still die if you're not paying attention, but I think that overall it's a very, very good first introduction to the series, honestly. No annoying dialogue or text boxes to tell you how to play the goddamn game. It shows you everything that it needs to show you through gameplay. For example, the thief standing on the village right off the bat shows you that you shouldn't be letting thieves to get to... You shouldn't... Hold on. You shouldn't be letting thieves get to any of the other villages because they're going to destroy them, and they do that without necessarily beating it into your head over and over and over again, and I think that's pretty cool. It gives you a pretty good chance to see what everything does, what everybody can do, and also it lets you make use of all of your characters, and everybody has a purpose, so it's good. It's good. I mean that totally unironically. And here is one that's almost, but not quite really good. I say almost and not quite really good because of one huge problem. One problem that even I cannot necessarily overlook. We're going to Echoes for this one. Hold your booze. Hold your booze. 4-4, Celica's route. The map with Jamil, the upheaval doucher. Right off the bat, you have to fend off a gigantic wave of witches, but I actually don't think that these guys are of any importance because you can get into their attack range right away. They're not going to teleport away from you if they can attack, so I don't think that they're necessarily a problem on this map. It was fun trying to find a way to quickly deal with them while also rushing over to Jamil to try to take him out before he can actually use the upheaval spell, and I think that that's where a lot of fun for this map came for me personally, was trying to find a way to deal with all the different things that this map is throwing at you at the same time. You've got a few Cantors in there. Actually, no, it's just one Cantor now that I think about it. But trying to find a way to deal with him while also moving the best people that you have to take on Jamil. In my case, it was like, I think it was May. May did probably the best against him. In fact, I think she just blew him away because that's what she does. But finding a way to deal with all the really powerful enemies inside the fortress while also taking out the Cantor in a fast and efficient way, while also getting rid of that initial wave of witches was fun. It was hectic. It was really good. It was really good. I swear Gaiden actually has secretly really good maps, and I stand by that. I will fight anybody. I don't care who you are. I don't care how big you think your brain is. I will take you on this point. The one thing, and the reason that I say that this is an almost really good map, is because unfortunately for this map, it has the dreaded floor tiles, and that is one design choice within Echoes and within Gaiden that I just can't get behind. That's one thing that I don't understand the purpose of, and although you can take advantage of it as well, adding more randomness to the mix is just really not, it's really not a good thing in my opinion, especially in a game that's so combat heavy. So unfortunately, as much as I would like to include this one on the list of really great maps, it does have that one black stain holding it back in my opinion. But if you can look past that, I do think that this is a really fun time. A really fun time to try to do it quickly. There's even the incentive to try to do it quickly, of course, because you've got that Cantor who will harass you constantly until you take him out of there, and Jamil himself who's going to blast you with upheavals repeatedly. But yeah, aside from that, this is actually a pretty good map. Pretty good map. I never even saw upheaval, honestly. I killed him too quick, man. Honestly, if I sat down and really thought about it, I'm sure I would come up with many, many more examples of maps that I feel are pretty good. But I kind of want to keep this moving a little bit. But there's just a few examples for you, just to give you guys kind of an idea of what I generally think of as a good map. Evan asks, why Fire Emblem content instead of like Final Fantasy or Pokemon or even Pokemon TCG or something? It's funny that you'd use those examples because I've literally done all of those things on this channel at one point or another, except for Pokemon TCG. Honestly though, it's just a series that I'm pretty familiar with, really. I've always liked the Fire Emblem series ever since I played Fire Emblem 7 on the Game Boy Advance. Been a pretty big fan. Even went so far as to go look up some of the other older Japanese exclusive titles, which by the time I was getting into the series, some of them had translations, not all of them. But some of them had translations that were at least playable, so I just kind of got on that train, and I've just been a fan of the series ever since. And I felt like I knew a lot about this series, so I had that going for me, and honestly one day I just decided to do a randomized run of Fire Emblem 6, and that was pretty much it, honestly. People seemed like they really enjoyed it for one reason or another, why I couldn't even begin to tell you. But it was just something that seemed like it worked. It just seemed like people were enjoying it, and that was an aspect of it that I liked. I liked being entertaining to people, so I just kind of stuck with it, and it just kind of ended up where it did. There were other things in this series that I had never been able to really do, but had always wanted to do, like Maniac Mode Path of Radiance. Turned out that was a bad idea. Or Fire Emblem 10. Like, that was a game that I had never even gotten the opportunity to play. And since I already had this channel, I thought, okay, well, why not record it? And that's just kind of where it that's just kind of where it ended up, honestly. It wasn't necessarily intentional to go this route, but that's just kind of where we are, and it's been a lot of fun, so I just kind of stuck with it, you know? Also, I like being able to show a spotlight on some of the games that I like. That's really the bottom line. I mean, it's not really frequent, I guess, but occasionally I've gotten comments from people saying, oh, I didn't know about this game, da-da-da-da-da, but, you know, watching your playthrough, I thought, oh, man, this is actually a pretty cool game. Path of Radiance, I remember seeing at least a few comments like that. And I know that not everybody has played every game of the series, so I like being able to show those off for people who can't necessarily play the games for whatever reason, be it they can't afford it or they're too hard to find. Some of these games are ridiculously rare or expensive, so it makes sense. And I feel like each game in the series has something about it that is really good in one way or another. Be it the gameplay, be it the music, the story, the characters, whatever, you know. It just turned out to be a fun thing to do, honestly. Of course, there are other games that I would like to show a spotlight on a little bit. Probably going to be doing a little bit more of that after we finish up with Birthright Saga, honestly, because I like having at least two things going on at the same time because of the length of these videos and whatnot. So because of the fact that they're like an hour plus each, I generally don't expect everybody to have the time to view that every single day, you know what I mean? And because of that, I don't really want to upload the same game over and over and over and over again, an hour plus at a time, because I feel like that's it's pretty easy to fall behind on a playthrough that you're enjoying if that is the case, you know. And that's like one of the worst things, you know, when you feel like you're behind. It's almost a chore to catch up at that point. So I wouldn't be surprised to see other things that aren't necessarily related to Fire Emblem after Birthright Saga is done, whenever that may be. But to sum it up, I think Fire Emblem because it's a game that I have knowledge on. It's a game that I enjoy playing even to this day. And it was a game that other people seem to enjoy watching. So I hope that answers your question on that one. Lynn Donut asks, how were you introduced to the series? Pretty standard, honestly. Melee was my first introduction to anything to do with this Fire Emblem series, and I had already played Shining Force at the time, and because of Melee, I was inclined to look up some stuff about this game, and I realized that it sounded sort of similar to Shining Force, which is a game I really liked. Unfortunately, I wasn't actually able to get my hands on this at the time. I can't remember what the reasoning for that was, but eventually I was over at a buddy's house, and his uncle had Fire Emblem for the Game Boy Advance, like the first one to come out in the U.S., and I got a chance to play it, and I remember it because he was on the Living Legend. He was on the Living Legend chapter. You know, the one where you have to protect Pen, or so you would think, except Pen actually in reality just blows everything away. But he was on that map, and I just remember seeing the gameplay in action, and I thought, wow, I just have to have this game. Everything looks so slick, so smooth, so cool, you know? So fast forward a little bit, and I still wasn't actually able to get my hands onto a physical copy of the game. I did eventually, but what I did at first was I tried to find an emulator and find a ROM for this. Now, this was way back in the day. Game Boy Advanced emulation was not exactly what it is today, where it's super easy to find every game you could ever possibly imagine. So this was like 2005, 2006 maybe. And I get on the internet and I'm looking for Fire Emblem. I didn't really know what to do. I was kind of new at this whole thing. So I'm looking for Fire Emblem ROM, and I eventually end up finding a Fire Emblem ROM. But little did I know, or little did I realize at the time, that this was Fire Emblem 1, like Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon. Not even Shadow Dragon, that wasn't out, but Fire Emblem Dark Dragon and the Blade of Light, or whatever the translation is going by these days. So I ended up downloading that, and a Nintendo emulator, or a Famicom emulator, I suppose, and I ended up playing that. I ended up playing that for a while, and despite how ridiculous this might sound, I actually found myself really enjoying it. I almost immediately fell in love with the characters and the gameplay, and even though I really couldn't understand what was going on, and what not being able to read Japanese and all that, I still managed to get pretty far into the game. I got to, I believe, the one where you first see Palacatri at actually like chapter 7 or so. I know I got to at least got to the part where you actually get the Fire Emblem. But I still wanted to play that Game Boy Advance game, the one that I had played over at my friend's house, and eventually I was actually able to track down a ROM and whatnot for that. And honestly, the rest is history, man. I played through Blazing Blades so many times. trying to use every different character, see what I couldn't do. At one point I had wanted to get all of the supports so I could have that in the support conversation viewer, but that never really happened because that game is so tedious to get supports in, man. But yeah, I love that game. I played the hell out of it. There's really not too much to add about that. I mean, you can see the effect that game had on me, right? I mean, it should be pretty apparent with what I'm doing with my free time these days. But I hope that answers your question. I also really enjoy hearing about these first-time experiences and whatnot. And that's another reason that I really like doing this. So I'm glad that you asked that question. Thank you. Psych asks, Deltre, why are you so cool? It's a curse, really. I don't really know where to go with this one other than that. But I am glad at least one person out there acknowledges the fact that I'm so cool and handsome. So thank you. TechnoFall42 asks, how are you so good at Fire Emblem? Hold up, are we playing Fire Emblem 12 all of a sudden? What's this? So first of all, I would say to anybody who is looking for just a list of like quick tips and tricks that you can use to improve your game a little bit, I would definitely recommend checking out the Fire Emblem Pitfalls series by Mecha. You can probably find it pretty easily. Just search Fire Emblem Pitfalls, and I'm sure that's probably one of the first things that would show up. But I tend to agree with a lot of things that he says in that series, and overall, it's a pretty good starting out point for somebody who would be trying to increase their level of play for whatever reason, either be it to have an easier time on higher difficulties, or just to challenge yourself, whatever it may be. One thing that I kind of wish was included in that would be maybe stress a little bit more just how much trying to challenge yourself to play quickly could do for your game, because that's really what I did. Like when I started doing this, for one reason or another, I don't know why, but I started to try and play the game a little bit more quickly. I guess for me personally, it was a matter of trying to save time, right? Because obviously, being that it's recorded, I don't want to be wasting time and whatnot. But I think that even discounting that's one way that you can very, very quickly and very easily improve your game. And I would almost recommend that you would play an easier game like Fire Emblem 8, for example, and play through that game, but try to play it as quickly as you possibly can. Try to never be turtling. And I think that that's one thing that will improve your gameplay no matter what. Because when you're not turtling, you're paying a lot more attention to enemy stats, enemy loadouts, positioning. You're more aware of what units can and can't do. And I think being aware of what units can and can't do is also a very large part in improving your gameplay. For example, people often talk about how overpowered paladins are in games like Fire Emblem 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so on and so forth. And I feel like a lot of lesser experienced or newer players might not necessarily understand why, because all they see is a mounted unit with maybe a few more points of move. But once you actually begin to understand how many options that actually gives you, and once you understand just how many options that the ability Kanto gives you, and their ability to rescue just about anybody on the map will give you, that's when you start to really understand the game and really be able to take off in a new direction with that sort of thing. If that's your cup of tea, you know, there's really no right or wrong way to play this game, honestly. But I do think that forcing yourself not to turtle, trying your very best to be offensive and aggressive as possible when playing through these maps, understanding the mechanics of each individual game, each individual character, each class, I think that those are some things that go a very, very long way in sort of increasing your own skill. Also, another thing that I know helped me a lot personally was playing these randomizers that I've been playing, but also playing them with the same sort of mentality, right? Where I'm still trying to go fast. I'm trying to have fun because it's a randomizer, obviously, but I'm still trying to go fast. And the reason that I think that actually could help just about any player is because it tests your fundamentals and it tests your understanding of the game. Because when you don't how should I put it? When you don't know what characters you're gonna get, you don't know the order you're gonna get them, and all you have to go on is base stats, growth rates, and your knowledge of the game. That really mixes up the formula a little bit, and it sort of incentivizes you to learn what is and what isn't a good unit in a unique way that you might not necessarily be forced to if you're just playing the standard vanilla game. And I know that one's kind of out there. I wouldn't necessarily say that that's a mandatory thing to do, but for me personally, it's definitely helped improve my game by a pretty significant margin, honestly. So yeah, I think that those would be the two really big general tips that I would give to just about anybody who wants to improve at the game. Maybe you're trying to do a higher difficulty or whatever have you. But the main thing really is to try and challenge yourself to play as quickly as you possibly can. And don't be afraid of failure, obviously. Now, not every plan is going to succeed on the first try. I mean, just look at any of my playthroughs. Let me tell you, there's a fair amount of failure in those. At the end of the day, I think that is probably the #1 way to improve your skill. And also challenging yourself to even take a randomizer, you know, I don't want to say take it seriously, but, you know, have fun with it. But still trying to see what you know, see what you can do. See if you can pick out who's going to be a good unit and who's going to be a bad unit before you train them. See if you have the fundamental understanding of the mechanics in order to make that kind of call right when you see the unit just based off their base stats and growth rates alone. And I think that is a pretty good way to just have some general skill with the game. For more specific things, it really does depend on the game because each game operates a little bit differently. And I know I went over some of that stuff earlier, so maybe that helped you out as well. But if you're looking for like general advice or general things to try to avoid when you're playing a game, like experience distribution, hoarding items, pre-promotes, that sort of thing, I really do think that I really do think the Mecha in his Pitfall series could do better justice to that, because each of them is sort of devoted to a separate topic, and I think you could learn more from that there than I could possibly fit into, you know, a few minutes worth of an answer, you know what I mean? So hopefully that helps a little bit, maybe at least gives you a point to start, or something to look up so you can have an easier time jumping into this in the future. Lou, the MVP, one of the day ones, hey! He asks, why the name Deltre? Oh, it's a nickname. I mean, yeah. It's a nickname I got in high school. One of my friends just randomly called me that one day, and I'm looking at her like, what the hell did you call me? Did you just insult me in a foreign language? But no, it was just a nickname, and I just happened to like it, so I just kind of stuck with it. Sorry if that's not the most exciting thing, but there you go. Orton Porter asks, my friends and I want to make a Fire Emblem fan game. Do you have any tips or suggestions? The #1 thing that I would recommend, first of all, is to start small. To start very, very small. Take what you think is small and start even smaller than that, honestly. I don't know what kind of skill level you or your friends have in actually hacking this sort of thing. But unfortunately, an idea isn't necessarily enough to get the kind of help that you would need for something like this if you are somebody of lesser experience. That's not to say anything about the hacking community. No, they're a great, wonderful bunch of people, but the reality of the situation is that a lot of people have a lot of ideas. And I'm not saying that this is you guys, by the way. This very well could be the exact opposite of you guys, in fact. But a lot of people have a lot of ideas, and some good ones at that, even. But they don't necessarily understand fully the amount of work that would go into creating a hack, or to I guess I shouldn't say that. It really does depend on the scale of the hack that you want to do. But if you're talking like a full feature-length Fire Emblem game, a lot of people really underestimate the workload that would go into something like that. And although they might have like some story outlines, maybe some concepts for characters, or some certain gimmicks that you might want to include in a few maps here and there, the reality is, again, you're going to have to put in the work if you actually want people to sort of gravitate towards your project. Have something to show people. Have something to show people, I guess, would be my #1 advice. If you're looking for specifics, as in like what tools to use and whatnot, I'm a big believer in Event Assembler. I know that it's being phased out. That's the tool that you would use for actually eventing each map. So that'd be like cutscenes, enemy unit placements, and whatnot, things of that nature. Event tiles, villages, chests, you know, that sort of thing. Nightmare is a decent place to start if you're just trying to do some really basic edits. You know, growth rates, base stats, that sort of thing. Text descriptions, although hacking is a complicated beast, man. But Nightmare is generally enough to make some smaller changes, whereas if you want to do something more grand, you're gonna need a different software. I know that there's a really good one floating around nowadays. I think it's called FIREEMBLEM. If there's text on the screen, roll with whatever the text says, because I'm not really 100% on that. I've been out of the game for a little bit here. But assuming that you guys aren't even to that point yet, I would definitely say that the number one thing would be to to start small and to work as you go. See what you can do, see what you still need help with, and go from there. If you are very serious about actually making a full game's worth of Fire Emblem hack, I would always recommend that you have something to show for it. Have a playable map, have some kind of demo. Even if you're using placeholder sprites and the like, just make sure that you have something to show, because people generally, and to go back to the point I was making earlier about the Fire Emblem hacking community, people really don't like to have their time wasted, and understandably so. Understandably so. The amount of effort and talent that goes into creating sprites, into actually getting a working ROM up and going, that's no small feat. That's no small feat, and people aren't really willing to invest their time into somebody else's passion project unless they know that there's going to be some kind of payoff at the end. And by having some kind of playable demo, even if it's just one map, having something to show for yourself is a much better way to get people interested, to get people engaged, than you would be if you just went in asking for help. Even if you were the nicest person in the world, you know, and you very well may be. But the reality is, most people are going to want to see some kind of results, some kind of work ethic before they're willing to jump on board. I mean, don't get discouraged. Don't let that be the thing that stops you. But I just want to let you know, as somebody who has dabbled a little bit in ROM hacking, especially the Game Boy Advance games, that if you want outside support, make sure that you do have something to put out there as well. Now, that's not to say you can't ask questions or anything. No, the community is actually generally pretty friendly with that sort of thing. When I was starting out, I didn't really have any trouble getting the answers that I was looking for. So I will say that. And again, don't let this discourage you. I know it's kind of scary hearing somebody come down like that and say, "Look, this is the way it is." But that really is just the way it is. But again, getting your questions answered and whatnot, that's no problem. People are generally pretty kind and receptive to that sort of thing. It's really more that once you start asking for other people to do work, that's when you're really going to want to have something to show. Other than that, man, go nuts. I mean, the sky is the limit when it comes to these things. You can do anything under the sun provided that your skill level provides it. So I do wish you good luck. I do hope that you are able to fulfill that little dream that you and your friends have. But understand that it's a very, very long process. It's a very long, time-consuming process. IZ asks, what motivated you to start making videos? Congrats on the 1K. I'm proud to be one of them. Thanks, man. I'm glad you're a part of this too. That's a good question. That's actually a pretty interesting question. A few reasons, really. One, I had the free time, so there's always that. And I wanted to share my thoughts and opinions on games that I really enjoyed. Not necessarily for any particular reason. I guess I just like the sound of my own voice or some crap. But I wanted to share my own thoughts and opinions on games that I had enjoyed, either be it games that I had enjoyed growing up, or games that I was currently playing, or series that I really had an affinity for, or whatever have you. And we already kind of talked about how that sort of spiraled into Fire Emblem at a certain point, but that was one of the main reasons that I wanted to get out there. And also I wanted to show some lesser known things. Like, for example, the first thing that I did was actually Final Fantasy Tactics 1.3, which was a modification for the original Final Fantasy Tactics on the PlayStation 1. And I wanted to show off a lot of the cool things that that game had to offer over the original game. I wanted to show a lot of the improvements that I had felt that game made. Because I don't know how familiar people actually are with the original Final Fantasy Tactics. Great game, fantastic game, tons of options, tons of customization, the whole nine. Really fun gameplay, satisfying gameplay at that. But they make a lot of it pointless because it's generally pretty easy, and there's things in that game that are so broken that to use anything else is simply hampering yourself, simply crippling yourself. And this was a modification. This was a mod that basically took away all the overpowered stuff, gave you some new toys to play with, and that was fairly unknown. So I wanted to do what little I could to introduce people to that. And unfortunately, I don't feel like I did the best job that I could have done, which is why that particular project is no longer on my channel. But that was one of the main initial factors in choosing to start this up. Similar to that first point, I also just like being able to show games that other people may not be able to play for themselves. we were kind of talking about this earlier, but with Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, I know that those are two games that are very difficult to come by. Not a whole lot of playthroughs of those that I've seen, and just the fact that I have the opportunity to play those for people who might not otherwise be able to is something cool. That's something I really enjoy. Another thing is, I just I like to try to be entertaining. I like to think that I can be entertaining, and I mean, maybe that's a little bit conceited, but I like making people laugh if I can, honestly. And if I've been able to do that at all, I honestly think that I have succeeded in what I set out to do. So that was another part of it. And honestly, just self-improvement. I think I've been able to express myself a lot more clearly and concisely since starting to do these videos. I mean, if you go back to, like, the Tearing Saga Let's Play, something that amazes me about this is that people still to this day tell me that they found this channel through the Tearing Saga Let's Play, and I see that and I'm just like, man. Man, oh man, it's almost embarrassing in a way. That's because I feel like I've come a long way since then. And honestly, keeping in mind that I did partially do this to improve my own linguistic skills, I think the mission's successful, man. Truth be told, I mean, like, I'm not trying to sound like a thesaurus or anything. I don't necessarily need to force myself to use incredibly complex language at all times or anything like that just to feel like I've accomplished that part of it, but just the ability to express what makes these games so great and to carry some of that skill over into my day-to-day life. I'm really glad that I started to do this in that sense. And that was one of the more personal reasons that I had for beginning this journey, so to speak. You feel me? That turned out to be a pretty interesting question. I hope that gives you at least some of an idea of where I'm coming from. Pezo asks, what video game series do you like other than FE? I feel like we spent a good amount of time on that one already, so hopefully that filled you in a little bit on that. But then he goes on to ask, best Fire Emblem soundtrack. Now this one's a little bit of a toss-up. I guess it would have to come down to one of Fire Emblem 4 or Fire Emblem Echoes. Fire Emblem 4 has nothing but bangers, man. Every single track in that game is good, especially the map themes, and thank God that they are, because you'll be hearing those a lot if you should ever choose to play through that one. On the other hand, Fire Emblem Echoes has some of, hands down, my favorite tracks in the series. What Lies at the End, that's a really good track. That would be Act 4 for Alm, just for the record. The Sacrificing the Saint, which would be Act 4 for Celica, with Mila's Divine Protection, obviously a really great tune. Everybody knows that one at this point, pretty much. March to Deliverance, from the earlier portions of the game on Alm's route. And I also like the fact that there was both a softer version and a more hardcore version of the initial tracks when you reached the finality of their respective acts. So for like March to Deliverance, it started off really soft. It wasn't nearly as intense, but by the time you made it to the end of Act 1, it's just loud and blaring and in your face, and I thought that was a really cool effect. It's sort of like what they do with the regular versions of songs versus the Blaze versions of songs in games like Awakening and Fates. So I thought that was really cool. Really, just all of the tracks are just amazing. Even the title screen track is amazing, honestly. So if I had to pick between one of the two of them, though, I guess I would have to give it to Fire Emblem 4, but not by a very large amount. They're neck and neck. They're neck and neck for me, honestly. Turtle Snore asks, 1. Can you do a Fire Emblem 4 and Fire Emblem 5 playthrough? I can do whatever I want! Yeah, that's right. I'm just kidding around, obviously. Never say never. Never say never. Definitely 2 playthroughs that are on my mind. I don't know when I would get to them, though. I don't want to give any definitive answers on that. 2. What is your favorite Fire Emblem character and class of all time? Fortunately, they happen to be rolled into the same thing. My favorite Fire Emblem character is my favorite Fire Emblem class, Jill. And I mean, honestly, I feel like I went on and on and on about her in both Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, but just to give a really quick summary, I feel like she is a side character who has nothing to do with the plot or anything important, or anything of relevance, really. And yet she still manages to be a really interesting and nuanced character. She still has her moments in the sun, and she gets a surprising amount of development for somebody who has absolutely nothing to do with the main storyline. And as for favorite classes, Wyvern Knights are badass, and that's really my logic there. I don't really have any kind of... There's really nothing surprising to my logic here. I just think that they look really cool. Honestly, if I had to give a runner-up for that one, I would say Sages would probably be my second most favorite class. But honestly, Wyvern Knights, Wyvern Lords, they're just too awesome. Flying around on a dragon. Who didn't want to do that when you were like a 10-year-old kid? Come on now, don't you give me that. Don't lie to me. We're all friends here. We can be honest. Come on now. You thought about it at least once. Kurt Gregor asks, will there be a Fire Emblem 4 playthrough? Now, it's really funny how many people are asking this one, because originally, in place of the Fire Emblem 12 playthrough, I was almost going to do a Fire Emblem 4 playthrough, but I really just wanted to do Lunatic Reverse New Mystery, so that was my logic there. But the footage from the Q&A announcement, 1,000 subscribers announcement video, was actually really, really old, like 3, 4, 5 months ago. Like, that footage is old. So it's definitely been one that's on the mind. And again, I really don't want to put a date to when that playthrough may be coming, but probably after Fire Emblem 12, honestly. I'm going to be honest. I'll say that. Probably after Fire Emblem 12. Saxor the Nobody says, congrats on 1K. I've been watching since the Fire Emblem 7 randomizer. Keep up the great work. Thanks, man. I definitely will. I really do appreciate all of these really generous, uplifting comments as well. It's really humbling, honestly. It really is. And I kind of already answered all of these questions, but I have an addendum. I have an addendum to one of these. He says, what are your favorite game franchises besides Fire Emblem? I don't know how I forgot about this one. I don't know why I didn't mention this. But Kingdom Goddamn Hearts. I've been waiting for this game. Okay. So, when I played Kingdom Hearts 2 in like the 6th grade, the wait between Kingdom Hearts 1 to Kingdom Hearts 2 felt like forever. Okay. It felt like forever and a day. In reality, looking back on it, it was only like 4 years or something like that. And oh god, what I would give for a 4-year gap between Kingdom Hearts 2 and Kingdom Hearts 3. But when I was playing Kingdom Hearts 2 in like the 6th grade, we had this joke, because it wasn't just me that was into the series. It was basically me and almost everybody that I was friends with had either played this game or was a fan of this game in some regard, or at least liked that song in the commercial, you know what I mean? So, we had this joke that by the time Kingdom Hearts 3 came out, we would all be in high school. Oh god, what I would give for that to be the truth, man. I'm sitting here in 2018, a grown-ass man, still waiting on a goddamn Disney crossover with Final Fantasy characters. I do not care. I'll be pushing over kids in line for that one. I do not care. I am Rob, the robot asks, how old are you?
24.
In which country do you live? The good old US of A. Just know that on behalf of all Americans, in case you are viewing this from outside the States, we're sorry. We're truly and honestly sorry. Favorite game in general? See, I'm the kind of person who doesn't like to put a definitive best game, worst game sort of thing. I think it would be easier for me to pick out a worst game of all time, but I couldn't really tell you what the best game, or at least not even my favorite game, really, because I have so many, and I like them all for different reasons. So I'm sorry that that's not really a good answer, but any of the games in the series that I had listed previously, any of them could honestly stand out as favorite game, to be honest. Including a lot of the games from the Fire Emblem series as well. Any of those could probably be a favorite game on any given day. I will say that the ones that I find myself going back to the most often, despite how long it's been since I had first played them, would probably be Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Mega Man X, Sacred Stones, and Final Fantasy Tactics. Now, I don't really want to put any of those as my favorite over any of the other, or even really any of the other games that I've listed, and God knows how long we've been doing this now, like an hour and a half, 2 hours, Jesus. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. I'm sorry that I'm not really one of those people who has like a favorite game of all time, but it really just depends a lot on the day or how I'm feeling or what kind of game I'm looking for, honestly, on that particular day. Joe JS16 asks, I guess in relation to all the Fire Emblem 4 comments, did you know that there's a Fire Emblem 4 randomizer? A little unpolished but playable. Yes, I actually am aware of the yeah, I do know about the randomizer. I kind of want to play Fire Emblem 4 normally if I'm going to play that game, because there's a lot with that game that I feel like people overlook, at least with the gameplay especially. So when I play that game, I really do intend to play it normally. I'm not saying that I would never do the randomizer. I almost certainly would at one point or another. But I am aware of it. I just don't think that that'll be the first Fire Emblem 4 related thing that we see. It does look pretty cool though, even if it is a little bit unpolished. I'm not actually sure what's wrong with it, if anything, so if anybody does know any bugs or anything like that, feel free to let me know, just so that I'll have that in the back of my mind for the future. Crispy Cookies! I love that name for some reason. He says, congrats on the 1K, dude. I'm a recent sub to the channel. I started watching your Tearing Saga LP about 2 months ago. I'm sorry. You're very entertaining and have some great commentary. I do hope to see your channel continue to grow. You and me both, man. Thank you for the kind words. Now, as for his questions, he says, what are some of your favorite OSTs, both Fire Emblem and other games? Well, we've already kind of talked to death about what I think about the Fire Emblem soundtracks for the most part. I obviously think they're all very good. I can't think of a single game in the series that doesn't have at least one track that I like. But as for other game series, now obviously I talked a lot about the soundtracks that I like in other games when we were talking about games that I enjoy besides Fire Emblem, so we can count those obviously. For some reason I need to make another addendum related to Kingdom Hearts. I forgot to mention anything about the soundtrack, but the soundtrack in that game, phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. I love all the Disney remixes, but I also like a lot of the original pieces too. Like the 13th Dilemma, which is the boss battle music for some of the Organization 13 in Kingdom Hearts 2. If you have no idea about any Kingdom Hearts knowledge whatsoever, probably making no sense, but it's just basically some really intense boss music by Yoko Shimomura, who also, what else did she do? I know there was something else that she did that I was a really big fan of. Let me look this up actually. Right, the Super Mario RPG series, both Mario and Luigi and the original game. She also did, I'm looking at her right now, hold up, Radiant Historia. Yeah, so this woman's a beast basically, that's what you're telling me. This woman is amazing. Give her a medal, please. The Chrono Trigger soundtrack is also disgustingly good, but I guess that's what happens when you have the dream team, right? You got Hironobu Sakaguchi of Final Fantasy, you got Akira Toriyama of Dragon Ball, you got Nobuo Uematsu. You got all these amazing people all coming together to work on one project, and it's so good. It's so good. But strictly speaking about the soundtrack, yeah, that game has a phenomenal soundtrack, easily one of the best in my opinion. Scala's theme, Corridors of Time, 600 AD. The Battle with Magus. Those are all some really obvious ones, but those are the first ones that come to mind, and they're all really good, so those are some pretty good examples. Definitely check out at least the soundtrack. I personally think it's one of the greatest games, definitely on the Super Nintendo at least. But even if you're not a fan, the soundtrack is at least worth a listen. Undersea Palace, Ocean Palace, whatever it's called, I don't remember. All really good stuff. I also really always liked Sonic 3's soundtrack, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, I guess. If I had to pick just one stage from that game that I think has the absolute best, Hydrocity Act 2. Hydrocity Act 2, probably. Maybe Lava Reef Act 1. But every single track in that game somehow manages to try and outdo one another, so I don't know. That one's a hard one for me. But, I mean, you had Michael Jackson working on the soundtrack, so what did you really expect? Honestly, say what you want about Sonic nowadays, but that is the one thing that they have always had over Mario. The soundtracks in those games were just so much better. So much better. And I can't be the only one who still knows all the words to Escape from the City, right? Right? Alright. I don't care. And of course, Mega Man X, the first one, also really great. If I had to pick just one stage, probably Armored Armadillo, because it's really fast-paced and super energetic, and I like that level a lot to begin with, and I think that's what I really like about that soundtrack in particular. It's sort of the same thing going on with Sonic's, but it's really energetic, and it definitely fits the game. It fits the mood of the game, where it's really fast-paced and hectic, and it makes you want to go, 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 you know what I mean? So I think that that's also a really important aspect to any soundtrack, not just necessarily the ones that I would consider my favorite, but any soundtrack should be able to fit the mood at hand, and I feel like this game, being the type of game it's trying to be, does that really well. Thoughts? on Echoes. You can't see it right now, but there is a huge smile on my face, man. I love this game so much. There is a reason that I put it at number 2 right behind Fire Emblem 5. And truth be told, the only reason that I can't justify putting it over Fire Emblem 5 in the first place has a lot to do with the type of bullshit that it throws at you, honestly. Now, Fire Emblem 5's bullshit is worse. Let me be clear about that. Fire Emblem 5's bullshit is completely and totally inexcusable on an objective standpoint. Some of the things that you have to do in that game are so ridiculous. Some of the challenges that you face are so utterly absurd and unfair, and there's absolutely no way that you would ever see them coming on a blind playthrough. I'm looking mainly at the warp tiles here. Those are so bad that they totally eclipse anything Echoes has ever done. No matter what you think about the map design, no matter what you think about the castle tiles, whatever. The warp tiles in Thracia are so much worse than that. But the reason that I'm able to look past that level of bullshittery is because with Thracia, you can look it up. You can look up where the warp tiles are. You can look up where the cryptic recruitments are. You can look up that sort of thing and completely nullify that as a gameplay element if you so choose. Unfortunately, with Echoes, the same cannot be said because no matter how much your knowledge is on this game, you still are going to have to roll those dice whenever it comes to engaging an enemy on a floor tile. And that's something that unfortunately can't be mitigated by any sort of outside factor. The rest of the game, though, I think that 95% of the gameplay is really good, honestly. I'm probably one of the only people out there that even bothers to defend the maps in the game because I genuinely think that a lot of them have something to offer or have a lot more to them than meets the eye. It's not a situation with Awakening where it feels as though enemies are haphazardly thrown onto the map and you're just gonna test your stats to see if you can come out on top. No, it's nothing like that. It's nothing like that, and I honestly do, to this very day, stand by that statement. I don't believe that the maps in Echoes are just thrown together. I don't think that they're just slapped together at all. The terrain often does make a huge difference in your strategies. The way that you go about things is not always the same. If it is always the same, then that's really more on you as a player, I feel, than as anything the game does, because I personally, when playing through this game, found myself relying on various different tactics to get through the game. Everybody was contributing constantly. I didn't really have all of these problems that everybody else seems to have when they're playing this game. I have to lay it out there right now. I don't think that every map in this game is a masterpiece by any means, but I do think that there are some outstanding ones that can hold their own with even the best within the series. And I know that's crazy. So many people are booing. Go ahead, hit that dislike button, see if I care. I asked for dislikes 2 episodes ago. You think you're gonna stop me now? I think not. As for in-depth thoughts on like each individual section or each individual map or whatever, again, I would kill to be able to play this game. I would kill to be able to play this game because so frequently, whenever I think about this game, I think of something new to love or something new to enjoy. And yes, even the goddamn gameplay, I don't care. I don't care. And here's the thing, because here's one of the number one arguments that I hear about the game, and it has to do with hit rates. Now, I'm gonna go right ahead and say, yes, I still give you guys castle tiles. Those are bullshit. You're never gonna hear me defend those. I never have, and I'm never going to. But here's the thing. Arguing that there's no other way to mitigate hit rates is just wrong. And here's why. So, combat arts. Every single combat art in the game gives hit. Every single combat art gives hit. Every single one. Except, excuse me, because I know there's going to be one guy who's like, well, actually, this combat art right here will reduce your hit rate. Yeah, there's one combat art in the game that reduces your hit rate. Failing that, every other combat art increases your hit rate by a range of 10 to 30 points, with the average being right around 20. Which conveniently is also the avoid rate increase of castle tiles, but I still don't think that they're a good idea. Forging is also now a thing in this game, and that's something that wasn't present in the original guide, and obviously. And those also increase hit rate. Supports. Now, not all of them give hit rate, unfortunately. I wish that they would have. I think that should have just been a flat bonus, but some of those also increase, guess what? Hit rate. Hit rate is not a thing in this game. It's not a problem in this game. Not any worse than any other Fire Emblem game that I can think of. If you played any of the Kaga Saga games either, like Tearing Saga, Berwick Saga, I don't understand how you can have a problem with this game. I'm one chapter in and I can see that Berwick Saga is at least on par, if not worse, than this. It has to be. Hit rate wise, anyways. For the other things, the presentation is just outstanding. Outstanding. I really hope that they kind of take this direction in the future. I really like the ability to walk around the villages and just examine everything for interesting little tidbits of information. Obviously, a lot of it is just useless flavor text, but it's really good for characterization of Almond Celica as you're taking control of them. It also helps build the world. It makes you feel like you're more of a part of it, I feel. Rather than just reading about it through text boxes, you actually get to go around and examine the world at your own leisure. And I feel like that's actually a really good thing. I'd be very disappointed if something similar to that didn't appear in future titles. And I know we had the My Castle thing in Fire Emblem Fates, but that was just one area. It's not really the same thing. You don't get the same sense of exploration and whatnot. Speaking of which, I liked the dungeons. I feel like they could have been a little bit more fleshed out. In a future title, I would expect them to be, but considering it was Gaiden and that they tried to stay mostly faithful and didn't probably really have the experience necessary to create full-fledged dungeons, and besides, it really is more of a secondary thing that was really only there because of the Gaiden. But I digress. I really did enjoy that aspect of it too, exploring each dungeon, trying to fill out the map, collecting treasures and whatnot, seeing whatever you could find. Maybe you would break open a box and get some kind of rare item drop or something like that. That was a really cool feature and feeling. I love the art style. I absolutely love the art style. I think Hidari did a fantastic job in really bringing these characters to life who otherwise had nothing really interesting or notable about them. Like, if you look at, let me get a good example here. Okay, Leon is actually a pretty good example, considering he was originally just a Ruka. He was a Ruka recolor. So now he's his own character. He's got his own design, his own personality, and oh my god, the personalities of each of the characters is just so good. I love every character in this game. That's never happened to me. I've never actually played a Fire Emblem game where everybody was awesome. Okay, like that just isn't something that happens. And there's not one character in this game that I don't enjoy in one way or another. Even the villains. Oh my god, the villain. The performance from Berkut was phenomenal. I don't care if what he's actually saying is like, oh, it's cliche, or oh, that doesn't make sense. Why would he feel like this, or da 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 da. It doesn't matter. His performance was so goddamn good that it sold it, and it really helps sell the whole thing. You really start to feel like he's just obsessed with Ulm. Like he just has to beat this guy, but he can't, and he keeps losing and losing and losing. And slowly but surely, as the game goes on, he becomes more and more upset by this, more and more insane, more and more desperate. And it's such a good game. Does anybody else remember that scene in the beginning of the game where you first get to the Deliverance hideout, and then Fernand is talking to Lucas, and he gets pissed off, and he goes, "I should rip that traitorous tongue right out of your throat." And then without missing a beat, Lucas fires right back. He says, "Then you'll finally have the truth within your grasp." Dude, that's flames. 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 Does Lucas have a SoundCloud? Because I'd follow him right now, dude. This dude could drop some sick bars. That was just the best thing I had ever heard in my life in this game. The writing is so good. The writing is so good. Well, the dialogue is so good. Again, they were kind of restricted because they're following the Gaiden story, which it's pretty standard by today's standards. That's a great sentence right there. But you get what I'm trying to say. By now, it's kind of played out. In the 90s, there weren't 1.5 million iterations of this exact sort of thing. But I don't care. The presentation, the personality of each of the characters, the dialogue is just so brilliantly written. The flavor text is amazing. God damn, I love this game. The fact that I didn't even have to look up a single line of that scene just tells you how much of an impression that made. I guarantee you that it's almost verbatim, that exact phrasing and whatnot. And like that was. All right. Let's settle ourselves a bit. Or what about how when you turn the game on for the first time, you're greeted to the title screen and it's Almond Celica as kids and they're walking through the flower field or whatnot. But when you beat the game, you know what? No, I'm not even gonna say what happens when you beat the game. All I'm gonna say is they need to stop cutting these damn onions around me when I'm trying to play Fire Emblem. That was so brilliant. It was such a good use of a title screen transition. I've never seen. Well, I've seen stuff like that, but goddamn, that caught me off guard, right in the feels. And why is it that everybody's vocal performance was so amazing? I already said Berkut, but it's not just him. It's literally everybody. It's actually just everybody in the game. Every single one. I don't know how. I don't know why. You know what it is? I think they got the 12 people who actually enjoyed Gaiden in its original form, and they actually put every single one of them onto the development team for this one. And God, did they do a good job. I don't know how they did this, but the team that made this game actually turned nothing into something. They broke the first law of conservation of mass, and I don't know how, but I'm glad that it happened, I guess. Honestly, I could spend like an entire video just talking about what my thoughts are on this game in particular. But I guess to wrap this one up, just to try and keep things moving a little bit, what do I think of Echoes? Yeah, it's alright. Favorite anime / cartoon or TV shows? I'm gonna be honest, I don't watch all that much anime. I have no problems with it, obviously. I think that should be pretty apparent. Favorite anime / cartoons or TV shows? I guess I'll start with an easy one and say that I really enjoy Dragon Ball Z. I always have. I always will, no doubt. Been a fan of this one since, like, the whole Dragon Ball Z craze way back in the day. Favorite character used to be Goku. Recently went down to the courthouse to try to change my name to 17, but they said it was illegal. They wouldn't let me. I was super bummed out. Shout out Dragon Ball Super. But yeah, Goku was definitely my favorite character way back in the day. Went to school with a kid whose favorite character was Vegeta, and like, oh man, you should have seen me then. I was heated. I was heated. Even I had to give it to him though after that episode of the Buu arc when Vegeta blew himself up to try to kill Majin Buu. I went to school the next day and I'm like, alright man, Vegeta's pretty cool. But Goku's that dude. I do not care. I do not care. Another one that I always really liked was Full Metal Alchemist. That one was a bit of a weird one for me because the Chimera episode really messed me up as a kid. That was some freaky crap. That was some really freaky stuff, man. If you haven't seen the show, well, in this case, be thankful, I guess, because that was rough. That was really rough. But I always thought that the idea of alchemy and the way that they used it in that show was a really cool one, and the action was also really good, of course, obviously. So yeah, that was the one that I always really enjoyed. I still do. Haven't watched Brotherhood yet. I probably should get around to that at some point. It's finished now, is it not? Yeah, I'm showing my anime knowledge here. But yeah, that was one that I always really enjoyed watching as a kid. More recently, I watched Paranoia Agent for the first time in like forever. I randomly heard in some videos somebody had made a reference to the opening theme song, and I'm like, man, I know what this is. I know what this is. What is this? And then, thankfully, for the first time in a long time, the YouTube comment section was insanely helpful. Well, I say for the first time in a long time, obviously excluding my own videos because you guys kill it, no lie. But I found out the name of the show in the comments of a YouTube video because I had forgotten. I hadn't seen this show since I was a kid again, and I watched it and I like binge watched the entire series in a day or two. If things are making a little bit too much sense, that's one that I would always recommend watching. Trippy show, trippy show. I'm talking like Fooly Cooly levels, just weird, and just weird. Oh yeah, did they ever make a season 2 of that? I thought that they were going to, but then just, like, didn't. Let me know. Cartoon / TV shows. 2 really raunchy ones, so we're gonna start cartoons with, South Park. I still really enjoy that. I don't care. I'll probably enjoy it until I'm an old man. Whatever, man. I don't care. Judge me if you want. I think that the only problem with that was, like, what was it? One of the more recent seasons where they were trying to follow the U.S. presidential election. That kind of imploded on itself because they predicted the wrong winner. So that season was maybe not so great. But I like the fact that they had the balls to go after literally everybody. And so I don't personally find myself getting offended by it because everybody gets it. Everybody gets it. It's just a matter of when is it going to be your turn, man. Really funny stuff, but again, it's more offensive humor, and if you're easily offended, it's not something that I can personally recommend. Similarly, I really enjoy Always Sunny in Philadelphia because every one of these people is a psychopath. They're all completely insane. It's like the reverse 80s sitcom. That's basically what it is. It's like if you took an 80s sitcom and then just made everybody a horrible person. And again, it's really raunchy, really... I guess offensive. I don't know. I'm not a person who finds themselves easily offended, but again, if you are, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this. But I find it so funny. These guys are all completely nuts, and I just love seeing what kind of crazy antics they find themselves in. I think there's like 8 or 9 seasons of this, and it is absolutely hilarious. James Bradshaw asks, boxers or briefs? Boxers, man. Sometimes it gets a little bit hot around here, and I get the need to feel that breeze between my knees, if you know what I'm saying. What kind of sicko wears briefs anyways, huh? He then goes on to ask, what's your opinion on Heroes? I think it's okay for what it is, I suppose. I'm a little bit disappointed that there's not like some kind of player versus player thing. I can get really competitive when it comes to these sort of things, and I was just a little bit disappointed to see that there was no way for me to kick my friend's ass or whatever using my favorite characters and whatnot, or really build any kind of competitive metagame around this, because this was like their best opportunity to do something like that. If you can imagine like a Pokemon Showdown situation, but with Fire Emblem, oh my god, I would have been all over that. But again, for what it is, I don't really see any major flaws with it. Obviously, spend responsibly, and I think that that's more of a personal thing. I do understand that there are people who maybe don't have the best control over that sort of thing. So in that sense, I haven't followed it closely enough to make any kind of opinions on that at that level, but I can just say that I hope that they're not taking advantage of the situation. But I never really got too big into it, so I can't really give any kind of in-depth opinions or anything like that, unfortunately. Runtaro asks, what is your opinion on Megs? It is my opinion that he should shout me out. I could use some free subs, man. Help a guy out. The actual answer is, I honestly didn't even know who he was until my Fire Emblem 7 randomized playthrough, when somebody had linked a video based on a comment I had made. I had said something along the lines of, well, to give context, I was in the battle preparations map, where it's basically just a bunch of shops in an arena in the middle, and I made a comment along the lines of, it's almost impossible to lose on this map. And somebody linked me a video link in the comments of this guy losing on this map. It was so funny. It was really funny, I'm not gonna lie. I had a good laugh about that one. As for any specific opinions, I haven't really had a chance to like sit down and go through any of his playthroughs or anything like that, or at least any of his Fire Emblem playthroughs. I was watching some of the Advance Wars stuff, because that was another game that I really liked, and I will say that he's a lot better at that game than I am, man. My playthrough of those games would be such a train wreck. It's not even funny. As for any opinions on him, like the person, I guess, he seems like a decent enough guy, honestly. I can't find anything that's particularly wrong with him. I don't know what you really want me to say here, but yeah, I don't really know him that well. I've never had a conversation with him or anything, so I can't say, but from initial impressions, he seems like a decent enough guy. So yeah, honestly, all in all, Mecha's second channel seems like it's alright to me. Mr. Rexfires says, this version of Land of Promise is amazing. Thank you, dude. I'm glad that you appreciate it. Here's a question. Where are you from? You sound like a California surfer. Don't give your... That's amazing. I've never heard that. I've never heard myself compared to a California surfer, dude. Yeah, man, righteous. Sorry, but the answer to that is a lot more boring. I'm actually from Michigan. What a horrible state. What a horrible state. Because I'm not from the good part of Michigan. I'm from the lower peninsula. The upper peninsula is beautiful. Absolutely great. I love going there whenever I get the opportunity. Lots of great sights to see. Down here, not so much. Not so much. It's a lot more industrialized, I guess. We've got like Detroit and crap down here. Whereas up north, it's like beautiful waterfalls and amazing nature and all this great stuff. Gotta go camping soon, I guess. But yeah, to answer your question, I live in Michigan, so there you go. Ethan says, fun fact, the Nailfarer is a mythological ship built from the fingernails and toenails of the dead. Its completion would herald the coming of Ragnarok, so the Norse would be sure to trim all the dead's nails to delay it as much as possible. Now, this isn't actually a question, but I wanted to include this because I absolutely butchered the pronunciation of this, and the trivia is nice, so thank you, I appreciate that. The boy asks, what kind of music do you listen to? Really, anything and everything. I know that that's a pretty boring answer, so I guess we can get a little bit more specific. Honestly, it depends a lot on what kind of mood I'm in, I suppose. Usually when I'm just doing crap on the computer or whatever, I tend to listen to a lot of lo-fi. I subscribe to a few different streams that just continuously play it. It's really chill, really relaxing, and I feel like if I'm trying to do work or whatever, it's just something nice to have in the background. I'll listen to it if I'm playing games or whatever. Unless it's like something super competitive and I'm trying to get heated for whatever reason. But yeah, it's just generally a nice, relaxing background noise. If I want to feel like I'm about to break some crap, I can throw on some metal. I'll listen to just about anything, honestly, like I said. But I even like metal to an extent. Not every subgenre and every little thing about metal, but like some of the more classic bands, I'll throw on some Pantera, I'll throw on some Metallica. Yeah, sure, why not? I can rock out to that anytime. Slayer, you know, I say not heavy stuff, but I mean like the really, really heavy stuff, like some obscure Norwegian death metal band. Like I'm not really into that so much, but anything lighter than that, I can generally, I'm generally alright with that, for the most part. Or if I feel like pretending I'm still in high school, I can throw on some Blink-182 or something like that. A little bit of punk rock, you know, Sum 41, stuff like that. I used to listen to those guys a lot, like way more than I probably should have. Way more than I probably should have, in fact. But it's still good. Like, I still like this stuff. It's just, I don't know. It really just depends on how I'm feeling on that day, honestly. Hip-hop, I like hip-hop, but I don't like the stuff that they play on the radio for the most part. Occasionally, where I, like, see, that's one of those things where it really depends on where you're from, honestly. My particular stations usually play garbage, but occasionally they'll play something that's alright. But if you were to ask me, like, hip-hop albums, I guess, I think that College Dropout was really good. Kanye West, anything from Kendrick. Emblem, obviously, I mean, he's really good. I don't care what anybody wants to say. People hate on this dude for, like, no reason. Of course he's not as good now. He's, like, 45. He's, like, pushing 50 years old, man. Just let this dude retire. Some underrated stuff, I guess, Immortal Technique. That dude... Sometimes I can tell he's just messing around, but sometimes he'll come out with a song that's just like really raw or like really that's very real or deals with some heavy subject matter, and I can appreciate that. I also like a lot of 90s rock, like Pearl Jam. 10 is one of my favorite albums of all time, honestly. Nirvana, Alice in Chains, you know, stuff like that. Only thing that I was never really big into was like country music, which is weird because my parents both love country music. Don't know why. I don't get it. It's not something for me, I guess. But something I guess I did kind of get from them is classic rock. I mean, like, if the mood is just right, I'll listen to stuff like Boston, Blue Oyster Cult, etc. Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix. Oh, I love Jimi Hendrix too. He's really he's an amazing guitarist. Died way too soon. But yeah, all in all, just whatever. Really, I'll listen to pretty much everything. I know that's not really the greatest answer in the world, but I honestly do have a pretty wide taste when it comes to music. Ronan asks, Deltray, what is your opinion on gay marriage? Well, honestly, I'm flattered, but I feel like we've just met. Maybe we should slow things down a little bit, don't you think? I guess the more serious answer would be that I honestly don't see anything wrong with it whatsoever. I've known several gay people throughout my life, and that's just it. I mean, I could probably end the qualifiers right there. They're just people. At the end of the day, they're just people like you and me, and I don't see any reason that they shouldn't have the same rights. Yeah, I mean, that's really all there is to say about it, I think. Jake asks, 3 questions. Who's your favorite all-time Fire Emblem unit? We've already covered that one, but just in case anybody missed it, Jill. I love that girl. What's the dumbest mistake you've made in a Fire Emblem game? Oh, he had Sea and Swords, man. I could have given him the Wyrm Slayer. Man. It's kind of hard for me to pick just one thing because I've done some really, really silly things in the past, and even recently, even in the previous part of Fire Emblem 8, I checked damage with the bolting with Natasha, and then I forgot to unequip it so that she wouldn't die, and then she immediately died, and that just made me feel pretty dumb because I was on such a good run of that particular attempt on the final map, and then I got blown away for such a silly, simple mistake. But if I had to pick one crowning achievement of stupidity, I would say thinking that Sophia was a good unit in Fire Emblem 6. I used to train her like every time I play that game. And I played that game like several times over, and I would train her every single time and thought that she was legitimately a worthwhile and useful addition to the team. Oh God, how wrong I was. I think that almost everybody has that one unit that they used to think was a good unit, but it is in reality horrible. So for me, I guess that would be her. He then goes on to ask, who is your favorite Awakening girl? Laura Bailey. Gotta be Lucina though, honestly. I could take on anybody with Lucina in Smash. I do not care. I'll take on any of you fools. Fight me anytime, any place, and Lucina will smash you. I guarantee. I feel like her addition to Smash was something that Sakurai did personally for me. Because okay, so a little bit of backstory. I used to use exclusively Marth when playing with like friends and stuff. And we would play a game within a game, right? We would play Super Smashed Bros. Not Super Smash Bros, but Super Smashed Bros. Figure out the context on your own. Bunch of college-age kids messing around. What do you think that it meant? Use your imagination. But the problem is that after a certain point, I wasn't able to play Marth very well because his gameplay was all about spacing and whatnot, so you had to be very careful with how close or far you are from your opponent. But then here comes Sakurai with Lucina, who does not care about that. And all of a sudden, I started to win a whole lot more at this game we were playing. So that's why I like Lucina in Smash. As for Awakening, I guess it helps that Lucina is pretty plot important and you have a pretty good opportunity to get to know her, I guess, more than some of the other characters. At least insofar as the children characters, obviously she's the most important one there. But I also just like the whole mask motif. That's another favorite archetype of mine. I guess I don't know if you could call it an archetype really at this point. There's only really serious Conrad and Lucina. I haven't really put a whole lot of thought into stuff like that before, honestly, but I guess Lucina just works for me, honestly. It's not that deep. I understand that, but I guess that's what it really comes down to. She gets stuff done and I like her design. So you got served asked, how many bears does Bear Grylls grill if Bear Grylls grill bears?
25.
Mega Koopa XX, have you partaken in the Church of Arden? Help, I'm getting memed on! Okay guys, I just finished editing this Q&A session and it's like almost 3 in the morning, to be honest. I'm really tired, but I did want to let you guys know that I had a lot of fun doing this. A lot of really good questions, a lot of unexpected questions too. Things that I didn't necessarily predict would be asked. And a lot more questions that I was really bargaining for, to be honest. A lot more than I was expecting. But I'm glad that many people were interested in participating. I'm glad that the questions that you guys did ask, I personally feel like they all had pretty interesting responses. And I hope that I hope that I didn't miss anybody. Obviously, if I did, I'm sorry. Just pester me on a different video, and I'll get back to you. But other than that, I hope that everybody who did ask a question had their question answered in a way that was, satisfying. And I will catch you guys on the next one with whatever it is that we're going to be doing. Obviously, I still need to do the real end for Fire Emblem 8. I didn't feel like putting it on this video because this video is incredibly long, so I think I would rather just keep it separately. But now you know the real reason that I cliffhung you guys on the previous part had nothing to do with me being a jerk. No, just this ROM is horrible. But anyways, guys, I'll catch you on the next one. See you then. Peace.